Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a bitter cold February night in rural Pennsylvania. I'd been Officer Obadiah Whitman for 11 years, working the graveyard shift in Hemlock County. Most nights were quiet, maybe a drunk driver, a domestic dispute, or teenagers vandalizing mailboxes. But that night, everything changed. I was parked at the old Sunoco station off Route 322. Finishing my third cup of black coffee and fighting to stay awake. The radio had been silent for nearly 2 hours when dispatch finally crackled to life. Unit 47, we have a possible break-in at 1842 Old Mill Road. Caller reports hearing strange noises from the abandoned Hartley property. Name is Prudence Blackwood. Lives next door at 1840. I knew the Hartley place. Everyone in Hemlock County did. It had been empty for nearly 3 years after old Samuel Hartley died. No family came to claim it, and the county hadn't gotten around to auctioning it off yet. The house sat rotting at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by overgrown fields and encroaching forest. Unit 47 responding, I said into the radio, already starting my cruiser. ETA 8 minutes. The drive out to Old Mill Road took me through the darkest part of the county. No streetlights, no houses for miles, just endless rows of bare trees scratching at the winter sky. My headlights cut through patches of fog that clung to the hollows. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read 19 degrees. When I turned onto Old Mill Road, the pavement gave way to gravel that crunched under my tires. The Blackwood residence came into view first. A modest ranch house with a porch light blazing and every window lit up like a Christmas tree. Next to it, separated by maybe 50 yards of tangled hedge, stood the Hartley house. Even in the darkness, the place looked wrong. It was a 2-story farmhouse that had probably been white once, but years of neglect had turned it gray. The roof sagged in the middle. Several windows were broken, their dark openings like dead eyes. The front porch had partially collapsed on one side. I pulled into Prudence Blackwood's driveway first. She was already standing at her front door, wrapped in a thick robe, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. She was maybe 65, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Thank God you're here, officer," she said before I could even introduce myself. I've been hearing it for the past hour, banging, scraping, like someone's tearing the place apart. "When did it start exactly?" I asked, pulling out my notepad. "Just after 2 o'clock. I couldn't sleep, my arthritis acts up in the cold, so I was in the kitchen making tea. That's when I heard the first crash. Sounded like glass breaking. I looked toward the Hartley house. It sat silent and dark. Have you seen anyone? Any vehicles? No, nothing like that, but I saw lights moving around inside. Not regular lights, more like flashlights or maybe candles. They moved from room to room, upstairs and down." "How long ago did you last see the lights?" "Maybe 15 minutes before I called, but the noises, they haven't stopped." As if on cue, a sound drifted across the cold air, a long, drawn-out scraping, like something heavy being dragged across wood. It was coming from the Hartley house. "Ma'am, I need you to go back inside and lock your doors," I said. "Keep your phone handy. I'm going to check it out." Prudence nodded quickly and retreated into her house. I heard the deadbolt click behind her. I got back in my cruiser and drove the short distance to the Hartley property. The driveway was overgrown with dead weeds that scraped against the undercarriage. I parked about 20 feet from the front porch, angling my vehicle so the headlights illuminated the front of the house. The place looked even worse up close. Paint peeled off in long strips. The front door hung slightly open, moving gently in the wind. Every window on the first floor was either broken or boarded up. The second floor windows were intact, but so dirty they might as well have been painted black. I radioed dispatch. Unit 47 at the Hartley property. Front door is open. I'm going to investigate. Copy that, 47. Backup is available if needed. I'll advise. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the cold. The temperature hit me like a physical force, making my eyes water. My breath came out in thick clouds. I approached the front door slowly, my hand resting on my service weapon. "Police!" I called out. "Anyone inside needs to come out now." Silence. I pushed the door open wider with my flashlight. The hinges screamed in protest. The beam of my light cut through the darkness, revealing a hallway cluttered with debris. Old newspapers, broken furniture, what looked like clothing. The smell hit me next. Mold, rot, and something else. Something organic and wrong, like meat left out too long. I stepped inside, glass crunching under my boots. This is Officer Whitman with Hemlock County Sheriff's Department. If anyone's in here, you need to make yourself known now. A sound came from somewhere deeper in the house, a shuffling, dragging noise. It was followed by what sounded like whispering, though I couldn't make out any words. The hallway led to what had once been a living room. My flashlight swept across overturned furniture, walls with massive water stains, and a fireplace filled with garbage. There were footprints in the dust on the floor. Fresh ones, multiple sets, going in different directions. I followed one set toward the kitchen. The whispers grew louder, though they still didn't sound like any language I recognized. It was more like a constant, rhythmic muttering. The kitchen was a disaster. Cabinets hung open, their contents spilled across counters thick with mold. The sink had pulled away from the wall, but what caught my attention was the basement door. It was open, and a faint orange glow emanated from below. The whispering was definitely coming from down there. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, I've got signs of occupancy. Multiple fresh footprints and what appears to be a light source in the basement. Requesting backup. Unit 23 is en route. ETA 12 minutes, 12 minutes. In a situation like this, that might as well be an hour." Another sound from the basement. A wet, tearing noise followed by a low moan. Not a moan of pain, but something else. Something that made the hair on my arms stand up under my uniform. I should have waited for backup. That's what procedure said. That's what common sense said. But there was something about that moan, something that suggested someone might be hurt down there. I started down the basement stairs, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. The wood was soft with rot, and several steps bent alarmingly under my boots. The orange glow grew stronger as I descended, and the temperature seemed to rise despite the freezing cold outside. The whispering stopped. I reached the bottom of the stairs and swept my flashlight across the basement. What I saw made me freeze. There were 3 people down there, arranged in a circle on the dirt floor. They were kneeling, facing inward, their heads bowed. Candles surrounded them, dozens of them, their flames creating dancing shadows on the stone walls. In the center of their circle was something covered with a tarp. "Police! Nobody move!" I shouted, my hand going to my weapon. None of them reacted. They remained perfectly still, heads down, as if they hadn't heard me at all. I said, "Don't move." Hands where I can see them. Still nothing. I moved closer, my flashlight beam playing across their faces. 2 men and a woman. all appearing to be in their 30s or 40s. Their eyes were closed, their lips moving slightly as if in prayer or meditation. Their clothes were filthy, covered in dirt and what looked like dried blood. Then I noticed their hands. Each person's hands were pressed flat against the dirt floor, and around each hand was a dark stain. Blood, fresh blood, seeping into the earth. What the hell? The tarp in the center suddenly moved, not a small movement, like wind catching fabric. Something underneath it shifted, something large. I took an involuntary step back, my weapon now drawn. Whoever's under there, come out slowly with your hands visible. The three people suddenly lifted their heads in perfect unison. Their eyes snapped open, but they weren't looking at me. They were staring straight ahead, through me, at something beyond. Their pupils were dilated to the point where their eyes looked completely black. Then they started to smile. The smiles weren't normal. They were too wide, stretching their faces in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Their lips pulled back to reveal teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp in the candlelight. And they were all doing it in perfect synchronization, like puppets controlled by the same hand. "Back away from whatever's under that tarp," I commanded, trying to keep my voice steady. My weapon was trained on the closest figure, one of the men. "Do it now." They didn't move. They just kept smiling that horrible smile, their black eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Then the woman spoke, her voice raw and hoarse, like she'd been screaming for hours. Officer Obadiah Whitman, born March 3rd, wife deceased, daughter in college, lives alone on Sycamore Street. My blood went cold. How did she know my name? How did she know about Martha's death, about Emily being away at school? How do you— "The house knows," the second man said, his voice overlapping with the woman's. "The house remembers everything, every secret, every sin, every moment of weakness." The tarp moved again, more violently this time. Whatever was underneath was trying to get out. I took another step back, my finger on the trigger. "I need all three of you to stand up slowly and move away from that tarp. This is your last warning." They laughed in unison, a sound that made my skin crawl. It wasn't human laughter. It was too rhythmic, too mechanical, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The first man finally spoke. "You want to see what we found, officer? What's been sleeping in this house for so long?" Before I could respond, he reached over and grabbed the edge of the tarp. In one swift motion, he yanked it away. I nearly dropped my weapon. Lying in the center of their circle was a man, or what used to be a man. He was naked, his skin pale and mottled with dark patches. His chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they'd done to him. His arms and legs were spread wide, staked to the dirt floor with what looked like railroad spikes. Dark symbols had been carved into his chest and stomach, the wounds fresh and seeping. His eyes were gone, not closed, but gone, leaving only dark, empty sockets. His mouth was open in a silent scream, his tongue missing. "Jesus Christ," I breathed, reaching for my radio. "Dispatch, I need—" The man on the floor suddenly arched his back, his body convulsing violently. A sound came from his throat, not a scream, but something worse. It was like multiple voices trying to speak at once, overlapping and distorting into something inhuman. The three kneeling figures began to chant, their voices rising and falling in a language I didn't recognize. The candles flared, their flames shooting up several feet, bathing the basement in orange light. "Dispatch!" I shouted into my radio. "I need backup and EMS immediately. Multiple suspects. Victim with severe injuries." The radio exploded with static so loud I had to pull it away from my ear. Through the static, I could hear voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering the same thing over and over. "Let us in. Let us in. Let us in." The woman stood up slowly, her movements jerky and unnatural. "He's the key, officer." The door. We found him living in the walls, feeding on the rot. He's been here since the house was built. Watching. Waiting. "Stay back," I shouted, but she kept moving toward me. "Do you know what this house was before Samuel Hartley bought it?" she asked, tilting her head at an impossible angle. "Do you know what happened in 1887? I didn't want to know. I just wanted to get out of that basement, but I couldn't leave the victim. Despite everything, I was still a cop, and there was someone who needed help. "Stop moving or I will shoot you," I warned. She laughed again. "Go ahead. We're already dead. We died the moment we entered this house. Now we're just occupied." The two men stood up as well, moving to flank me. I swept my weapon between them, trying to cover all three at once. "Get on the ground, all of you." The victim on the floor began to speak, or rather, something spoke through him. The voice that came from his mutilated mouth was clear and articulate, completely at odds with his physical condition. 17 children, the voice said. 17 children buried beneath this foundation. Their bones mixed with the mortar. Their blood fed to the earth. This house was built on their suffering, and their suffering never ended. The basement suddenly felt colder. My breath came out in visible puffs. The candle flames turned blue, casting everything in an eerie underwater light. "That's why Samuel never had children," the woman said, still approaching. "That's why everyone who's lived here either died or disappeared. The children don't like adults. They especially don't like adults in uniform." I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Heavy, measured steps. My backup couldn't have arrived that quickly. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw another figure descending. It was a man in. "This is your last warning." They laughed in unison, a sound that made my skin crawl. It wasn't human laughter. It was too rhythmic, too mechanical, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The first man finally spoke. "You want to see what we found, officer? What's been sleeping in this house for so long?" Before I could respond, he reached over and grabbed the edge of the tarp. In one swift motion, he yanked it away. I nearly dropped my weapon. Lying in the center of their circle was a man, or what used to be a man. He was naked, his skin pale and mottled with dark patches. His chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they'd done to him. His arms and legs were spread wide, staked to the dirt floor with what looked like railroad spikes. Dark symbols had been carved into his chest and stomach, the wounds fresh and seeping. His eyes were gone, not closed, but gone, leaving only dark, empty sockets. His mouth was open in a silent scream, his tongue missing. "Jesus Christ," I breathed, reaching for my radio. "Dispatch, I need—" The man on the floor suddenly arched his back, his body convulsing violently. A sound came from his throat. Not a scream, but something worse. It was like multiple voices trying to speak at once, overlapping and distorting into something inhuman. The three kneeling figures began to chant, their voices rising and falling in a language I didn't recognize. The candles flared, their flames shooting up several feet, bathing the basement in orange light. "Dispatch," I shouted into my radio. "I need backup and EMS immediately. Multiple suspects, victim with severe injuries." The radio exploded with static so loud I had to pull it away from my ear. Through the static, I could hear voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering the same thing over and over. "Let us in, let us in, let us in." The woman stood up slowly, her movements jerky and unnatural. "He's the key, officer." The door. We found him living in the walls, feeding on the rot. He's been here since the house was built, watching, waiting. "Stay back," I shouted, but she kept moving toward me. "Do you know what this house was before Samuel Hartley bought it?" she asked, tilting her head at an impossible angle. "Do you know what happened in 1887? I didn't want to know. I just wanted to get out of that basement, but I couldn't leave the victim. Despite everything, I was still a cop, and there was someone who needed help. "Stop moving, or I will shoot you," I warned. She laughed again. "Go ahead. We're already dead. We died the moment we entered this house. Now, we're just occupied." The two men stood up as well, moving to flank me. I swept my weapon between them, trying to cover all three at once. "Get on the ground, all of you." The victim on the floor began to speak, or rather, something spoke through him. The voice that came from his mutilated mouth was clear and articulate, completely at odds with his physical condition. 17 children, the voice said. 17 children buried beneath this foundation. Their bones mixed with the mortar. Their blood fed to the earth. This house was built on their suffering, and their suffering never ended. The basement suddenly felt colder. My breath came out in visible puffs. The candle flames turned blue, casting everything in an eerie underwater light. "That's why Samuel never had children," the woman said, still approaching. "That's why everyone who's lived here either died or disappeared. The children don't like adults. They especially don't like adults in uniform." I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Heavy, measured steps. My backup couldn't have arrived that quickly. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw another figure descending. It was a man in coveralls, his face obscured by shadow. But there was something wrong with the way he moved. His limbs bent in the wrong places, like his joints were reversed. "Ezra?" I called out, hoping it might be Ezra Hutchinson, Prudence's other neighbor who sometimes helped with police matters. "Is that you?" The figure stepped into the candlelight, and I saw his face. It was Ezra, but his features were wrong. His eyes were on the sides of his head, like a prey animal's. His mouth was vertical instead of horizontal. When he smiled, it split his face from forehead to chin. "Hello, officer," he said, his voice coming from somewhere other than his malformed mouth. "Prudence sends her regards. She's been waiting for you to come here for so long. We all have." That's when I understood. This wasn't random, this was planned, orchestrated. "There was no break-in," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "Prudence made the call to get me here." The woman nodded, now close enough that I could smell her. Death and earth and something chemical. The house needs an authority figure, someone with power. Someone who enforces rules. It feeds on the contradiction. The protector becoming the predator. The law becoming lawless. "You're insane," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew insanity couldn't explain what I was seeing. The victim on the floor sat up suddenly, the railroad spikes tearing through his flesh with wet, ripping sounds. He shouldn't have been able to move at all, much less sit up, but physics seemed to have no meaning in that basement. Black liquid poured from his wounds, pooling on the dirt floor. 43 years I waited, he said in that multi-voiced whisper. 43 years feeding on the darkness between the walls. But now you're here, the last piece, the final sacrifice. I made a decision. I couldn't save everyone, but I might be able to save myself. I fired 3 shots at the woman advancing on me. The bullets struck her center mass and she stumbled backward but didn't fall. Instead, she looked down at the wounds with curiosity, poking at them with her fingers. "That tickles," she said, giggling. I turned and rushed toward the stairs, shoving past the thing that looked like Ezra. It grabbed at me with hands that had too many fingers, but I broke free and took the stairs 3 at a time. Behind me, I could hear them following, not running, but walking with purposeful, measured steps. The main floor of the house had changed. The hallway that should have led to the front door now turned left into a room I hadn't seen before. The walls were covered in children's drawings, crude figures in crayon and what looked like blood. The drawings showed a house with stick figures inside, and outside, more stick figures wearing badges and uniforms. All of them were on fire. I found a window and didn't hesitate. I threw myself through it, the glass shattering around me. I hit the frozen ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I forced myself to my feet and ran toward my cruiser. The house behind me was fully illuminated now, every window blazing with that blue-white light. I could see figures in every window, not just the 3 from the basement, but dozens of them. They were all watching me, all smiling those impossible smiles. I reached my cruiser and fumbled for the keys with shaking hands. The radio was still spitting static and voices. Through it all, I heard dispatch trying to reach me. "Unit 47, what's your status?" "Unit 47, respond." I grabbed the radio. "This is 47. I need every available unit at the Hartley house. Officer needs assistance. Multiple suspects, officer injured." The radio died, not just static, completely dead. The engine wouldn't start either. Nothing electronic in the cruiser worked. I looked back at the house. The front door was open and they were coming out. Not just the 3 from the basement, but more. So many more. They moved in perfect formation, like a military unit, all walking in step. I did the only thing I could do. I ran. I ran through the frozen fields, thorns tearing at my uniform. I ran through the woods, branches whipping at my face. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like they would give out. Behind me, I could hear them following, not hurrying, just maintaining that steady, relentless pace. I finally reached the main road just as the real backup arrived. 3 cruisers with lights blazing. I collapsed on the asphalt, gasping for breath, trying to explain what couldn't be explained. "The house," I gasped. "Don't go in the house." Deputy Rogers helped me to my feet. "What happened?" "You're bleeding." I looked back toward the Hartley property. In the distance, I could see the faint glow of fire. The house was burning. "We need to set up a perimeter," I said. "Nobody goes near that place." But when we returned with the fire department and a full SWAT team, we found nothing. The house was intact, dark, and empty. No signs of fire. No evidence of the people I'd seen in the basement. No victims staked to the floor. Even the candles were gone. The only thing we found was a single piece of paper on the kitchen counter, written in what looked like dried blood. "Thank you for visiting, Officer Whitman. The children are satisfied. For now." The investigation that followed was a nightmare of bureaucracy and disbelief. Captain Morrison sat across from me in the station's interview room, his weathered face creased with concern. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look sick. "Run through it one more time, Obadiah," he said, though I could tell he was struggling to believe even the parts that made sense. I responded to a call from Prudence Blackwood about suspicious activity at the Hartley house. I repeated for the 4th time. When I investigated, I found 3 individuals in the basement conducting what appeared to be some kind of ritual. There was a victim with severe injuries. When I attempted to intervene, I was attacked and had to retreat. Morrison rubbed his temples. But when backup arrived, there was nothing. No evidence of anyone being there. The house was cleaned out, I insisted. They must have had help. More people involved. Prudence Blackwood says she never made any call, Morrison said quietly. She was visiting her sister in Harrisburg. Has been for the past week. We confirmed it with the sister. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. I saw her. I spoke to her. The phone records show no call from her number to dispatch that night. In fact, the only call dispatch logged was from you, saying you were investigating suspicious activity at the Hartley place. Check the dash cam, I said desperately. My cruiser's dash cam will show. We did. The camera malfunctioned. All we have is static from the moment you turned onto Old Mill Road. I slumped in my chair. Without evidence, I sounded insane. Maybe I was insane. Morrison leaned forward. Look, you've been under a lot of stress since Martha passed. Maybe you should take some time. This isn't about Martha, I snapped. Something happened in that house. Something real. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. The mind can play tricks, especially in the dark, especially when you're alone. Had I imagined it all? Had the grief and isolation finally broken something inside me? They put me on administrative leave pending a psychological evaluation. The department therapist, Dr. Hollenbrook, was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who took notes on everything I said but offered little in return. Have you been sleeping well, Officer Whitman? No. Any particular reason? I wanted to tell him about the dreams. The dreams where I was back in that basement, where the walls were made of children's bones, where their voices whispered accusations through the ventilation grates. But I knew that would only confirm what everyone already thought, that I'd had a breakdown. Just stress, I lied. 2 weeks into my leave, I started my own investigation. I went to the county records office and dug into the history of the Hartley property. What I found made my skin crawl. The land had changed hands dozens of times since the 1800s. The longest anyone had ever lived there was 3 years. The records were full of tragedy. Suicides, disappearances, entire families simply vanishing. In 1887, the date the woman in the basement had mentioned, 17 children from a nearby orphanage had indeed gone missing. They were never found, and the orphanage was shut down shortly after. The orphanage had been on the same plot of land where the Hartley house now stood. I tracked down Ezra Hutchinson, the real one, at his home 2 counties over. He was very much alive and very much normal. 2 eyes in the right places, mouth horizontal as it should be. He'd been in Florida visiting his grandchildren the night of the incident. Never been to the Hartley place, he told me. Prudence always warned me to stay away from there, said it was cursed. You know Prudence well? Known her 40 years. Good woman, bit superstitious though. She's got all these stories about that house. Says her grandmother used to work at the orphanage that was there before. Apparently, the woman went mad, claimed the children were being fed to something in the basement. I felt my heart skip. Fed to something? Ezra shrugged. Old stories. You know how they grow over time. But Prudence believed them. She'd never go near that house, not for anything. That night, I sat in my empty house, staring at the police report I'd written. Every word of it was true, but truth and belief are different things. The department had quietly closed the case, attributing my experience to a stress-induced hallucination. They'd even found a gas leak in the Hartley house's basement that could have caused hallucinations. A convenient explanation that everyone was eager to accept. But gas leaks don't leave notes written in blood. Gas leaks don't know your wife's name, or that your daughter is in college. I decided to go back one more time. Not as a cop, but as someone who needed answers. It was a Thursday night, exactly 1 month after the original incident. I parked my personal vehicle a half-mile away and walked to the Hartley house through the woods. I brought a camera, a voice recorder, and samples bags. If there was evidence, I'd find it. The house looked different in the moonlight. Smaller somehow, less threatening. The front door was boarded up now, courtesy of the county. But boards are easy enough to pry loose when you have the right tools. Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered it from my first entry. Debris, mold, that oppressive sense of wrongness. I made my way to the basement door, my flashlight beam steady despite my shaking hands. The basement stairs creaked under my weight. At the bottom, I found exactly what the official report described. An empty basement with a dirt floor. No signs of candles, no blood, no evidence of the horror I'd witnessed. But then I noticed something the investigators had missed. In the corner, partially hidden by shadow, was a small door, not much bigger than a crawlspace entrance. It had been painted to match the stone walls, making it nearly invisible. I opened it. Behind the door was a narrow tunnel that led deeper underground. The walls were lined with stones that looked far older than the house above. I had to crouch to move through it, my shoulders brushing the sides. The air grew colder the deeper I went. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber about 20 feet across. The walls were covered in symbols I didn't recognize, carved deep into the stone. In the center of the floor was a pit, maybe 3 feet in diameter, that descended into absolute darkness. Even my flashlight beam couldn't find the bottom. Around the pit were personal items, watches, wallets, jewelry, badges. I recognized one immediately. Officer Patricia Danforth's badge. She disappeared in 1992 while investigating a reported break-in at the Hartley house. Her body was never found. There were more badges. 7 in total, dating back to 1934. All officers who had gone missing over the years, their disappearances eventually attributed to various explanations: desertion, suicide, accidents. But they'd all been here. I photographed everything, my camera flash illuminating the chamber in stark bursts. That's when I noticed the scratches on the walls near the pit. Fingernail marks, hundreds of them, as if people had tried to claw their way out. A sound echoed from the tunnel behind me. Footsteps, slow and measured. I turned, my light catching a figure at the tunnel entrance. It was Prudence Blackwood. The real one this time, I was certain. She looked older than when I'd supposedly seen her before, more frail. "I told you not to come here," she said, her voice sad rather than threatening. "I've spent 40 years trying to keep people away." "You knew," I said. "You knew what was here." She nodded slowly. "My grandmother was the last caretaker. She fed it, kept it satisfied. When she died, she made my mother promise to keep people away. My mother passed that burden to me." "Fed what? What's down that pit?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Nobody knows. It's been here longer than the town, longer than the records. The indigenous people who lived here before us, they knew to avoid this place. They called it the Hungry Dark. The children from the orphanage were given to it, yes. The orphanage director thought he could control it, use it somehow. He was wrong. It took them all, and then it took him too. And the police officers? It calls to authority figures, people with power. It feeds on them differently than regular people. That's why I've worked so hard to keep law enforcement away. Anonymous tips about gas leaks, reports of structural damage, anything to keep you all from coming here. But you called that night, or something pretending to be you did." Her face paled. "It's getting stronger. It doesn't need me anymore. It can mimic voices now, make phone calls. Soon it won't need this house at all." As if responding to her words, a sound rose from the pit. Not quite a voice, not quite wind, but something between the two. It formed words, though they seemed to come from inside my skull rather than through my ears. "Officer Whitman," it said, "you came back. Good." The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. Ice began forming on the stone walls. "Run," Prudence whispered. "Run now." But I couldn't move. Something held me in place, not physically, but mentally. I felt my feet moving toward the pit against my will. "No!" Prudence grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Remember your daughter. Emily needs you. Martha may be gone, but Emily needs her father." The mention of my family broke whatever hold the thing had on me. I stumbled backward, pulling Prudence with me toward the tunnel. Behind us, something began climbing out of the pit. I didn't turn to look. The sound alone, wet and wrong and impossibly large, was enough to send us scrambling through the tunnel. We burst out of the basement and ran for the front door. The house groaned around us, walls shifting, doorways appearing where they shouldn't be. But Prudence seemed to know the way, guiding me through the maze until we exploded out into the night air. "Burn it," she gasped. "We have to burn it all." I had emergency flares in my car. We lit them and threw them through the windows, the old wood catching immediately. As the flames rose, we heard sounds from inside, screaming that might have been wind, crashing that might have been support beams failing. We watched from a safe distance as the Hartley house burned. Fire trucks arrived eventually, but by then it was too late. The house collapsed into its own basement, sealing whatever was in that pit under tons of burning debris. The official report stated that the fire was caused by vagrants, probably cooking drugs. Prudence backed up my story that we'd seen smoke and called it in. The department was happy to close the book on the Hartley house permanently. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. I returned to active duty after passing my psychological evaluation, but nothing felt the same. Every abandoned building called made my hands shake. Every shadow in a basement made me reach for my weapon. The other officers noticed, of course. They were professional about it, but I could see the concern in their eyes, hear the whispers when they thought I wasn't listening. Prudence Blackwood and I met regularly at a diner on the county line, always during daylight hours. She was the only person who understood what we'd experienced, the only one who didn't think I was crazy. My grandmother left journals, she told me one afternoon in late spring, sliding a worn leather book across the table. I never had the courage to read them before, but after what happened, I needed to understand. The journal was dated 1889, written in careful cursive that had faded to brown. The entries detailed her grandmother's time as a nurse at the orphanage, before it burned down, before the children disappeared. The director, Mr. Josiah Crane, was obsessed with what he called the ancient presence beneath the property, I read aloud. He believed it could grant power to those who fed it properly. He started with animals, dogs, cats, livestock, but it always wanted more. Prudence nodded grimly. Keep reading. The children have been chosen. 17 souls, he says, to seal a covenant. I tried to stop him, but he has the others convinced. They believe they'll be rewarded, made immortal. I fear we are all damned. The final entry was dated October 31st, 1887. It is done. The children are gone, taken by the dark. But it wasn't satisfied. It took Crane and the others too. I alone survived, hidden in the root cellar. I can hear it calling, always calling. I will seal the entrance and pray that time forgets this place. God forgive us all. She spent the rest of her life making sure no one built on that land, Prudence said. But after she died, the family lost influence. The Hartleys bought it in 1976, built right on top of the old foundation. And Samuel Hartley? Found dead in the basement 3 years later. Heart attack, they said. But the coroner's report mentioned strange marks on his body, symbols carved into his chest. Sound familiar? I pushed the journal back across the table, my coffee growing cold. Why didn't you destroy it all years ago? Burn it down before anyone else could be hurt. Prudence's eyes filled with tears. I tried. 3 times I tried. Each time, I'd wake up back in my bed with no memory of leaving the house. It wouldn't let me. It needed that house as an anchor, a doorway. That's why it finally let us burn it. It had grown strong enough to exist without it. That thought chilled me more than anything else. You mean it's still out there? Somewhere, yes, but weakened, dispersed. It'll take years, maybe decades to reform. By then, I'll be dead, and this will be someone else's problem. She laughed bitterly. My family's curse passed on to strangers. That night, I went home and called Emily at college. Just hearing her voice helped ground me, reminded me that there was still good in the world, still reasons to keep fighting. "Dad, you sound tired," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just wanted to hear your voice." "Is this about Mom again?" "Dad, it's been 2 years. She wouldn't want you to." "It's not about Mom," I said, though in a way it was. Martha's death had left me vulnerable, isolated. Maybe that's why the house had chosen me. "I just wanted to tell you I love you." "I love you too, Dad. Are you sure you're okay?" "I am, now." But I wasn't. Not really. The nightmares started a week after the fire. Always the same. I was back in that circular chamber staring down into the pit. But this time, I could see the bottom. It was full of children, their faces pale and upturned, their mouths open in silent screams. They reached up toward me with thin arms, begging for help I couldn't give. And behind them, in the deepest dark, something else moved. Something vast and ancient and hungry. I'd wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of ash and copper in my mouth. Sometimes I'd find bruises on my arms in the morning, finger marks as if someone had grabbed me in my sleep. Once, I woke up, standing in my basement, staring at the floor drain as if expecting something to crawl out. 3 months after the fire, I got a call from dispatch at 3 a.m. Not over the radio, on my personal cell phone. "Officer Whitman," the voice said, and I recognized it immediately. It was the multi-toned whisper from the pit. "You thought fire could stop us. You thought earth and rubble could contain us. You were wrong. How are you? We are in the wires now, in the signals, in the spaces between wavelengths. Every abandoned house is our house. Every basement is our basement. And every officer who enters them risks becoming ours." The line went dead. When I checked my phone, there was no record of the call. I tried to warn the department, but how could I explain it without sounding completely insane? Instead, I did what I could. I volunteered for every abandoned building call, every basement check. If other officers noticed I was protective to the point of paranoia, they didn't say anything. 6 months after the Hartley house burned, Officer Tommy Brennan, a rookie fresh from the academy, responded to a vagrant call at an abandoned textile mill. He went in alone despite protocol. They found him 3 hours later in the basement, catatonic, his eyes solid black. He never spoke again. The official report blamed a gas leak, just like mine. A year after the fire, Detective Margaret Cross investigated a child abuse case that led her to an abandoned farmhouse. She came out changed, quit the force the next day, and moved across the country without explanation. Before she left, she found me at the station. "You know, don't you?" she said, her hand shaking as she gripped my arm. "You've seen it too. The dark that eats, the hunger that never ends." I could only nod. "How do you keep going?" she asked. "How do you put on the badge knowing it's out there?" "Because someone has to," I said. "Someone has to stand between it and everyone else. Someone has to know the truth." She left without another word, and I never saw her again. Prudence died 2 years after the fire, peacefully in her sleep. She left me everything related to the Hartley house: journals, photographs, records going back generations. Her final note to me was simple: "The burden is yours now." God help you. I'm still a cop, still working the graveyard shift in Hemlock County. I'm the senior officer now, the one the rookies look up to, the one with all the stories. But there's one story I never tell, one warning I can't give without destroying my credibility entirely. So, I do what I can. I respond to every abandoned building call personally. I make sure no one goes into basements alone. I insist on checking every corner, every shadow, always watching for signs. Circles of candles, symbols on walls, pits that go too deep. Most nights are quiet. Most calls are nothing. But sometimes, maybe once or twice a year, I arrive at a scene and feel that familiar chill. Smell that particular mix of rot and copper. Hear whispers that shouldn't exist. When that happens, I call for backup immediately, evacuate everyone, and find some excuse, structural damage, chemical hazard, anything, to keep people away. The other officers think I'm overly cautious, maybe even paranoid. Let them think that. It's better than the alternative. Last month, they started construction on a new shopping complex on Old Mill Road, right where the Hartley house used to stand. The construction crew has already reported 3 accidents, all in the basement level they're digging. Workers claim to hear voices in the foundation, see shadows where there shouldn't be any. I've been watching the site whenever I can, waiting, because I know it's not over. The house may be gone, but what lived beneath it is patient. It survived decades, maybe centuries, before the house was built. It can survive without it. Sometimes, on very quiet nights when I'm parked alone on some empty street, my radio will crackle with static that almost sounds like words. Sometimes my dash cam will flicker and show images of places I've never been. Basements full of bones, chambers carved from living rock, pits that descend forever into hungry darkness. And sometimes, in my rearview mirror, I see them. 3 figures standing at the side of the road, smiling those impossible smiles, their black eyes reflecting my taillights. They never approach, never threaten. They just watch, waiting, because they know something I've come to understand. There's no winning this fight, only delaying the inevitable. The hungry dark has always been here, and it always will be. All we can do is stand guard, keep watch, and hope that when our time comes, someone else will take up the burden. My daughter Emily is in her final year of college now, studying criminal justice. She wants to be a cop like her old man. I've tried to talk her out of it, but she's stubborn like her mother was. Last week, she called to tell me she'd been accepted to the police academy. I should be proud. Any father would be proud. But all I feel is dread. Because I know that someday, probably sooner than later, she'll get a call about suspicious activity at an abandoned building. She'll respond, eager to prove herself, confident in her training and her courage. And if I'm not there to stop her, if I can't protect her, she'll walk into that darkness just like I did. And the hungry dark will be waiting. They found my body this morning at 1842 Old Mill Road, at the construction site where the Hartley house once stood. I'd been checking the basement they'd just finished excavating, making sure nothing had been disturbed. The official report will say I had a heart attack, just like Samuel Hartley all those years ago. But you and I know better, don't we? The construction workers are already reporting problems. Tools going missing. Strange sounds in the walls. Shadows that move when no one's there to cast them. They'll bring in inspectors, investigators, eventually cops. Maybe it'll be Emily who responds to that call. Maybe it'll be someone else's daughter or son. Either way, the cycle continues. I tried to stop it. God knows I tried. But some hungers can't be satisfied, some darkness can't be illuminated, and some duties can only be passed on to the next guardian. If you're reading this, if you're a cop working the graveyard shift, remember this. Not every call is what it seems. Not every basement is just a basement. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is refuse to go down those stairs. Watch for the signs. Trust your instincts. And whatever you do, never go into an abandoned building alone. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a humid August night that made everything feel heavy and wrong. I was Officer Cornelius Blackthorne, 12 years with the Millbrook Police Department, and I thought I'd seen everything our small Connecticut town could throw at me. Drug busts, domestic violence, even a murder-suicide back in 2018. But nothing prepared me for the Harrington case. I was parked behind the abandoned Dairy Queen on Route 44, watching for speeders and fighting to stay awake in the oppressive heat. The radio had been quiet for nearly an hour when dispatch broke through the silence. Unit 19, we have a reported missing child at 445 Elm Grove Lane. Parents report their 7-year-old son, Jedediah Harrington, missing from his bedroom. Window found open. Both parents on scene. I sat up straight, instantly alert. Missing kids were the worst calls. Every second mattered. Unit 19 responding, I said, already pulling out onto the main road. What time was the child last seen? Mother reports putting him to bed at 8:30 p.m. Discovered missing at 11:40 p.m. when she went to check on him. 3 hours. In missing child cases, 3 hours might as well be 3 days. My stomach clenched as I hit the lights and pushed the accelerator. Elm Grove Lane was in the older part of Millbrook, where Victorian houses sat on large wooded lots. The kind of neighborhood where people still left their doors unlocked and kids played outside until dark. The Harrington house stood at the end of the lane, a 3-story colonial with dark shutters and a wraparound porch. Every light in the house was blazing, turning it into a beacon in the darkness. I pulled into the driveway behind a silver minivan and a black BMW. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving frantically inside. I grabbed my flashlight and notepad, took a deep breath to center myself, and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it flew open. A woman stood there, maybe 35, with long auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her hands shaking as she gripped the doorframe. This had to be Temperance Harrington. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice cracking. "Jedediah's gone." Someone took him. The window. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Blackthorne. Let's go inside and you can tell me everything." She led me into a living room that looked like it had been ransacked. Cushions thrown off the couch, toys scattered everywhere, papers strewn across the coffee table. A man sat in an armchair with his head in his hands. He looked up as we entered, and I saw his face was pale, almost gray. Silas Harrington, according to my notes. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, I know this is terrifying, but I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Every detail could help us find Jedediah." Temperance sat on the couch, wringing her hands. "I put him to bed at 8:30, just like always. Read him a story. He loves those books about knights and dragons. He was tired, said his stomach hurt a little, but nothing serious. I gave him some water and tucked him in. Did you lock his window? It was cracked for air. It's been so hot, and his room gets stuffy, but it was locked in position. It could only open about 6 inches. And then Silas and I were downstairs watching TV. We didn't hear anything unusual. No sounds from his room, no crying, nothing. At 11:40, I went up to check on him before we went to bed. I always do that. And his bed was empty. The window was wide open, screen pushed out. I made notes. Can you show me his room? They led me upstairs to a small bedroom at the back of the house. It was exactly as they'd described. Bed covers pulled back, window wide open, screen lying on the roof of the back porch. What struck me immediately was how neat everything else was. No signs of struggle. The toys on his shelf were undisturbed. His water glass still sat on the nightstand, half full. I leaned out the window with my flashlight. The porch roof was directly below, an easy climb for an adult. From there, it was maybe an 8-foot drop to the ground. But something bothered me. Does Jedediah sleepwalk? I asked. Temperance and Silas exchanged a quick glance. Too quick. Sometimes, Temperance admitted. But he's never left his room before. Has he ever tried to open the window while sleepwalking? Another glance between them. Once or twice, Silas said slowly. But we put a lock on it after that. He couldn't have opened it himself. I examined the window lock. It was a simple slide bolt, and it had been forced. The wood around it was splintered. But the damage looked old, painted over. When did this damage occur? Last month, Temperance said. Jedediah had one of his episodes. He was very upset about something and tried to force the window. We fixed it as best we could. Episodes? Silas stood up abruptly. Why are you asking about Jedediah instead of looking for him? Someone took our son. His anger was sudden and seemed forced, like he was playing a role he thought he should play. I'd seen enough grieving parents to know the difference between genuine anguish and performance. Mr. Harrington, I need to understand everything about Jedediah to find him. Does he have behavioral issues? Medical conditions? He's just a normal boy, Temperance said quickly. Too quickly. Very creative, very imaginative. Sometimes he gets confused between his games and reality, but all kids do that. I walked around the room, looking for anything out of place. That's when I noticed the closet door was slightly ajar. Inside, pushed to the back, was a pile of stuffed animals. They were all torn apart, their stuffing pulled out and scattered. The destruction looked deliberate, methodical. What happened to these? I asked. Temperance's face went even paler. Jedediah did that last week. He said they were bad, said they were watching him. Has he shown other violent behaviors? He's not violent, Silas snapped. He's 7 years old. I understand this is difficult, but... A sound from downstairs cut me off. The back door closing, footsteps. We all froze. Did you leave the back door open? I whispered. They shook their heads. I drew my weapon and motioned for them to stay put. Moving quietly, I made my way to the stairs. The footsteps were in the kitchen now, slow and measured. Not trying to be quiet, but not hurried either. Police, I called out. Identify yourself. The footsteps stopped. I descended the stairs, weapon at the ready, and turned into the kitchen. A small figure stood by the refrigerator, backlit by its open door. It was a child, wearing dinosaur pajamas, holding a juice box. Jedediah? Temperance screamed from behind me, pushing past to grab the boy. But the child stepped back, avoiding her embrace. In the light from the refrigerator, I could see his face clearly. It was blank, expressionless, his eyes unfocused. "Jedediah, honey, where were you?" Temperance asked, dropping to her knees in front of him. The boy tilted his head slightly, as if confused by the question. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "I was in the special place." "What special place?" I asked gently, holstering my weapon. His eyes shifted to me, and for just a moment I saw something there. Not the confusion of a 7-year-old, but something older, calculating. "The place where the other children go," he said. "The ones who don't want to be found." Silas had joined us now, standing in the doorway. He and Temperance exchanged another one of those loaded glances. "Jedediah," I said, keeping my voice calm and friendly, "can you tell me how you got to this special place?" "I walked." "Through the window?" He shook his head. "Windows are for looking. Doors are for walking." "Which door did you use?" He pointed toward the basement door. Temperance quickly interjected, "He's confused. He must have hit his head or something. We should take him to the hospital." "In a moment," I said. "Jedediah, was anyone with you in the special place?" The boy's expression changed then, a smile spreading across his face that was too wide, too knowing for a 7-year-old. "They're always there. They've been waiting so long for someone to play with. Who are they?" "The children who lived here before. They don't like the new family. They don't like liars." Silas stepped forward aggressively. "That's enough. Our son is clearly traumatized. We're taking him to the hospital now. Mr. Harrington, I need to—" "No!" He was shouting now. "You need to leave. We found our son. Case closed. Get out of our house." Something was very wrong here. Every instinct I had was screaming it. But technically he was right. The child had been found, apparently unharmed. Without evidence of a crime, I had no reason to stay. "I'll need to file a report," I said, "and Child Services will want to follow up." "Fine," Silas said. "Tomorrow. Right now, our son needs medical attention." I looked at Jedediah one more time. He was staring at me with those strange, knowing eyes. "Officer," he said in that flat voice, "you should check the basement. They left something for you." Temperance grabbed him roughly by the shoulders. "Stop it, Jedediah. Stop these games right now." For the first time, emotion flickered across the boy's face. Fear. Real, genuine fear. But not of his mother. He was looking past her, at something only he could see. "They're angry now," he whispered. "They don't like being ignored." The lights in the kitchen suddenly flickered and went out. In the darkness, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Children's laughter, multiple voices, coming from beneath our feet. From the basement. When the lights came back on a second later, Jedediah was gone. The back door stood open, swinging gently in the humid night breeze. Temperance screamed. Silas stood frozen, his face white with shock, and from the basement came the sound of small feet running, playing, and that terrible laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I reached for my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 19. I need backup at 445 Elm Grove Lane. Multiple units. Possible child endangerment situation." But the radio was dead. No static, no response, nothing. We were alone in that house with whatever was in the basement, and Jedediah was missing again. Only this time, I wasn't sure we wanted to find him, because something told me that whatever came back the first time wearing Jedediah's face might not have been Jedediah at all. The house seemed to pulse around us, like a living thing holding its breath. And from below, the laughter continued, getting louder, getting closer. I looked at Temperance and Silas, the masks they'd been wearing, the concerned parents, the worried mother and protective father. were slipping. Underneath was something else. Fear, yes, but also guilt. They knew something. They'd known all along. "What's in your basement?" I asked, my hand moving back to my weapon. Temperance started to cry, not the desperate tears of a mother with a missing child, but the hopeless sobs of someone whose terrible secret was about to be exposed. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "We just wanted him to be normal. We just wanted the voices to stop." "What voices?" "The ones he's heard since we moved here," Silas said, his voice hollow. "The voices of the children who died in this house." He said they talked to him, played with him. We thought he was sick. We tried medication, therapy, everything. Nothing worked. "So, what did you do?" They looked at each other, then at the basement door. "We tried to make them go away," Temperance said. "We held a ceremony. Someone told us it would quiet the spirits, make them leave Jedediah alone." "When was this?" 3 nights ago." "And what happened?" "Jedediah disappeared for 6 hours. When he came back, he was different, quieter. We thought it worked." The laughter from the basement stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. Then, from directly behind the basement door, came a child's voice. But not Jedediah's. This voice was older, raspier, like it hadn't been used in years. "Would you like to play with us, Officer Blackthorne?" I knew that voice. God help me, I knew that voice. It was Timothy Crane. He'd gone missing in 1987, right here in Millbrook. His body was never found. He'd been 7 years old, the same age as Jedediah. I stood frozen in that kitchen, my mind racing through the impossible. Timothy Crane had been missing for 36 years. Even if he'd somehow survived, he'd be 43 years old now, not a child. But that voice, it was unmistakably a child's voice, raw and desperate. "Timothy Crane disappeared in 1987, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the chill running down my spine. "If you know something about that case—" "We don't know anything about that," Silas interrupted, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted to his wife, then to the basement door, then back to me. The voice came again, closer now, as if it was pressed against the other side of the door. "They know everything, officer. They know about all of us, about what happened in the room downstairs, about why we can never leave." Temperance collapsed into a kitchen chair, sobbing uncontrollably. "We didn't know when we bought the house. The realtor said it had history, but the price was so good, and we needed somewhere after Jedediah's problems at the last place." "What problems?" I demanded. "He hurt another child," Silas admitted quietly. "Said the voices told him to do it. We had to leave Pittsburgh quickly, quietly. Paid the family off to avoid charges. He was only 5. 5 years old and violent enough to require fleeing the state." I felt my hand tighten on my weapon. "So, you moved here, to this house, and the problems got worse?" "At first, no," Temperance said through her tears. "For the first few months, Jedediah was perfect. Normal. We thought the change of scenery had helped. Then he found the room." "What room?" They both looked at the basement door. "There's a hidden room down there," Silas said, "behind the furnace. It's been sealed off, bricked up, but somehow Jedediah found a way in. We caught him talking to the walls down there, having full conversations with nobody. When we tried to stop him from going down there, he became violent. "Show me," I ordered. "No!" Temperance grabbed my arm. "You don't understand. Whatever's down there, it's not just voices. We've seen things. Shadows that move wrong. Handprints on the walls that weren't there before. And the smell." She was cut off by the sound of the basement door slowly creaking open. We all turned to look. The door swung wide, revealing absolute darkness beyond. The light from the kitchen should have illuminated at least the first few steps, but it was as if the darkness was solid, impenetrable. Then Jedediah stepped out, but it wasn't the Jedediah from before. This child looked older somehow, his features sharper, his eyes completely black. No whites, no irises, just glossy black orbs that reflected the kitchen light like oil. "Hello, Mother, Father." His voice was different too, layered, as if multiple children were speaking in unison. "We've been having such fun downstairs. Would you like to see?" Temperance whimpered and pressed herself against the wall. Silas stepped protectively in front of her, though his hands were shaking. "Jedediah," I said calmly, though my heart was hammering, "I need you to step away from the door." Those black eyes turned to me, and when he smiled, I saw his teeth had been filed to points. Fresh blood ran down his chin. "Jedediah isn't here anymore," the thing wearing the boy's face said. "He's playing with the others now. Down in the dark, where the bad children go, where they put us when we wouldn't stop crying. Who put you there? The people who built this house. They needed somewhere to put the unwanted ones, the broken ones, the ones who knew too much." The child thing tilted its head at an unnatural angle. Just like Jedediah knew too much about what Mommy and Daddy really did to his baby sister. Temperance screamed, "We don't have a daughter." "We never had a daughter." But Silas had gone white as paper. "Temperance, stop." She turned on him, wild-eyed. "No, we agreed never to—" "Tell him." The child thing's voice boomed, shaking the windows. "Tell him about Amelia." The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began forming on the windows despite the August heat. My breath came out in visible puffs. "2 years ago," Silas whispered, his voice broken, "Temperance was pregnant. When the baby was born, she was wrong, deformed. She wouldn't stop crying ever. The doctors said she was in constant pain, would never have any quality of life. So you killed her," I said, the pieces falling into place. "We ended her suffering." Temperance sobbed. "It was mercy." "Jedediah saw," the child thing continued, its black eyes never blinking. "Little Jedediah watched from the doorway as Daddy held the pillow over baby Amelia's face, watched Mommy hold her tiny hands still. Then they told him he dreamed it. Told him Amelia never existed. But the dead remember, Officer Blackthorne. The dead always remember." I reached for my radio again, but it crackled with that same children's laughter. Every electronic device in the kitchen, the microwave, the oven clock, even my phone, displayed the same message. "Play with us. Where is the real Jedediah?" I demanded. The child thing giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "Would you like to see? Would you like to come downstairs and play?" Before I could respond, it turned and walked back into that solid darkness. Against every instinct, I followed. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world changed. The wooden stairs I expected weren't there. Instead, I was walking down stone steps, ancient and worn smooth by countless feet. The walls were stone too, sweating with moisture and covered in scratch marks, desperate claw marks made by small fingers. Behind me, I heard Temperance and Silas following, whimpering with each step. The stairs went down much further than any basement should. 20 feet, 30, 40. The air grew thick and stale, tasting of copper and decay. My flashlight beam seemed to be swallowed by the darkness, only illuminating a few feet ahead. Finally, we reached the bottom. We stood in a circular stone chamber that couldn't possibly exist under a suburban house. The walls were lined with small alcoves, each just big enough for a child to stand in. Some were empty, others contained small skeletons, still dressed in the rotted remains of clothing from different eras, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, right up to modern day. A museum of dead children, perfectly preserved in their stone tombs. In the center of the room was a pit, maybe 10 feet across, filled with black water that didn't reflect any light. And standing at its edge was Jedediah, the real Jedediah, pale and shaking, his dinosaur pajamas torn and dirty. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice small and terrified. "Mommy, I want to go home." Temperance started toward him, but I grabbed her arm. "Wait. This is too easy." That's when I noticed the other children. They emerged from the shadows between the alcoves. Dozens of them, all ages between 5 and 10, all wearing the clothes they'd died in. Their faces were pale as bone, their eyes those same black orbs. Timothy Crane was among them, exactly as he'd looked in his missing poster from 1987. "Welcome, Officer Blackthorne," Timothy said in that raspy voice. "We've been waiting so long for someone in authority to come. Someone who could make it official." "Make what official?" "The trade," another child said. A girl in a 1960s dress. "The house demands payment. One child from each family that lives here. But the Harringtons tried to cheat. They already gave one child to death, little Amelia. They thought that would count. But murder isn't the same as sacrifice." "So, you want Jedediah?" "No," Timothy said, smiling with too many teeth. "Jedediah has already joined us, haven't you, Jed?" The boy by the pit turned, and I saw his eyes had turned black. He smiled, that same pointed-tooth smile. "I like it here," he said in that layered voice. "The others understand me. They don't pretend I'm normal. They don't lie about what I've seen." "Then, what do you want?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "We want them," all the children said in unison, pointing at Temperance and Silas. "The murderers. The liars. The ones who killed a baby and called it mercy. The house judges them worthy of collection." Temperance and Silas backed toward the stairs, but the entrance had vanished. We were sealed in. "You can't be real," Silas said desperately. "This is mass hallucination, gas leak, something." One of the children, a boy who couldn't have been more than 6 when he died, walked up to Silas and touched his hand. Where the child's fingers made contact, Silas's skin immediately turned black with frostbite. He screamed and jerked away. "Real enough?" the boy asked sweetly. I had to make a decision. As a cop, my duty was to protect and serve. But protect whom? The parents who had murdered their infant daughter? Or their son, who seemed to have already crossed over into something else? "If I let you take them," I said slowly, "well, what happens to Jedediah?" "He stays with us," Timothy said. "He's ours now. Has been since he first found the room and heard our voices. Some children are born to join us, born with the darkness already inside." "And if I refuse?" The children all laughed, that terrible chorus of dead voices. "Then you all stay. Forever." "The house is hungry, officer. It's been feeding on children's pain for over a century. But it's never had a police officer before. Think of the authority you'd bring to our collection." I looked at Temperance and Silas, huddled together in terror. Thought about baby Amelia, murdered in her crib. Thought about the other child Jedediah had hurt in Pittsburgh. Thought about all the children whose bones lined these walls. "There has to be another way," I said. "There is," Jedediah said, stepping closer to the pit. "The house will accept a different trade. A confession. Full confession recorded, admissible in court. Tell the truth about Amelia. Tell the truth about what you made me watch. Tell the truth about every lie you've told." "We can't," Temperance whispered. "We'll go to prison." Yes, all the children said together. You will. I pulled out my phone. Miraculously, it was working again. I hit record. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, I said formally, I'm going to need you to confess to the murder of your daughter, Amelia Harrington. I'll also need you to confess to the cover-up of Jedediah's assault in Pittsburgh. Full confession, right now, or I leave you here with them. They looked at each other, then at the dozens of dead children surrounding them, then at their son who had become something else entirely. And they began to talk. They confessed everything. The baby's birth defects, the decision to end her life, the way they'd disposed of the body, how they'd gaslit Jedediah when he'd tried to tell people, the assault in Pittsburgh, worse than they'd initially admitted, the bribes, the lies, all of it. When they finished, the recording was 43 minutes long, enough to put them away for life. Is it enough? I asked the children. Timothy looked at the others, some silent communication passing between them. Then he nodded. The house accepts this payment. Their suffering in prison will feed it for years. You may go. The stairs reappeared. I grabbed Temperance and Silas and shoved them toward it. Move, now. We climbed those impossible stone steps, and suddenly we were back in a normal basement. Concrete walls, exposed beams, a standard furnace. No hidden room. No evidence of what we'd just experienced except for the recording on my phone and the frostbite on Silas's hand. What about Jedediah? Temperance asked, desperately. Our son? Your son is gone, I said flatly. He made his choice. We emerged into the kitchen to find it full of police officers. My backup had finally arrived, 12 units responding to a call I didn't remember making. But there they were, weapons drawn, looking confused. Cornelius, Sergeant Patterson said, your radio's been going crazy for 20 minutes. What the hell? Mr. and Mrs. Harrington just confessed to murdering their infant daughter, I said, holding up my phone. And to conspiracy to cover up assault of a minor in Pennsylvania. I need them processed immediately. What about the missing kid? Patterson asked. The boy? I looked back at the basement door. It was closed now, looking perfectly normal. He's gone, I said. Search the house, the grounds, everywhere, but you won't find him. And they didn't. The aftermath was a bureaucratic nightmare. Temperance and Silas Harrington were arrested on charges of murder, child endangerment, conspiracy, and interstate fraud. The recording I'd made in that impossible basement was crystal clear, every word admissible. But when the forensics team went through the house, they found no evidence of the stone chamber, no pit, no alcoves with children's bones. The basement was just a basement. What they did find was Amelia Harrington's body. Following Temperance's confession, they located the infant's remains in a storage unit across town, wrapped in plastic and hidden inside an old suitcase. The coroner confirmed she'd died of suffocation approximately 2 years ago, just as the parents had admitted. The birth defects Silas had mentioned were real. Spina bifida, hydrocephalus, multiple organ deformities. The baby would have lived in constant pain, but that didn't make what they'd done legal or forgivable. The search for Jedediah continued for weeks. State police, FBI, volunteer search teams, everyone wanted to find the boy who'd vanished from his own home. They dragged the nearby river, searched every abandoned building in a 50-mile radius, checked with relatives across the country. Nothing. I knew they wouldn't find him. I knew because 3 nights after the incident I saw him again. I was working another graveyard shift, trying to lose myself in the routine of patrol. It was 2:15 a.m. and I was parked at the Millbrook Elementary School, watching for vandals who'd been spray painting the playground equipment. The radio was quiet, the night was still, and I was fighting to stay awake when movement caught my eye. A small figure was sitting on one of the swings, slowly rocking back and forth. Even from 50 yards away, I recognized those dinosaur pajamas. I got out of the cruiser slowly, my hand instinctively moving to my weapon, though I knew it would be useless. "Jedediah?" The boy looked up, and in the moonlight I could see his eyes were normal again. Brown, not black. He looked exactly like the scared 7-year-old I'd first seen in that kitchen. But I knew better. "Hello, Officer Blackthorne," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the empty playground. "Are you here to arrest me?" "Are you really Jedediah?" I asked, moving closer. He tilted his head, considering. "I'm what's left of him, the part that remembers birthdays and Saturday cartoons and the way Mom used to sing before Amelia. The rest of me is with them now, down in the dark. The other children?" He nodded. "They're not bad, you know. Just hurt, angry, forgotten. The house collects broken children, the ones nobody wants to remember. It's been doing it for over 100 years. I sat down on the swing next to him, the chains creaking under my weight. "Tell me about the house." "It was built on a bad place," Jedediah said, pumping his legs slightly to swing higher. "A place where they used to put the children nobody wanted. The orphanage was just the last version. Before that, it was a workhouse. Before that, indigenous peoples used it as a place to abandon cursed children. The ground itself is hungry for innocence. And it's still there? Even with your parents arrested? It'll always be there. Someone will buy the house eventually. Someone always does. And if they have children..." He trailed off, but I understood. "Can it be stopped?" Jedediah stopped swinging and looked at me with eyes too old for his face. "Why would you want to stop it?" "It takes the children who are already broken, the ones who've seen too much, done too much. Like me. I killed my sister's cat when I was 4. Did you know that? Mom's first cat before Amelia. I squeezed it until it stopped moving because I wanted to see what death looked like up close. I felt cold despite the warm night. That doesn't mean you deserved, doesn't it?" He started swinging again. "I was going to hurt more people, officer." I could feel it growing inside me, getting stronger every day. The need to cause pain, to see fear. The house knew. It called to me because it recognized what I was becoming. "You were just a child. You needed help. I was a predator in training." His voice was matter-of-fact, emotionless. "The therapists in Pittsburgh knew it. That's why they recommended institutional placement. But Mom and Dad couldn't bear the shame, so they ran. And they found the perfect house. Cheap, isolated, with a reputation that would explain away any strange behavior." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the creaking of the swing chains. "Are you going to file a report about seeing me?" he asked. "Would anyone believe me?" He smiled, a sad expression that looked wrong on such a young face. "No, they'd think you were having a breakdown. Post-traumatic stress from finding a missing child case you couldn't solve. So, what happens now? Now, I visit sometimes. Check on the house. Make sure the wrong families don't move in. Families with normal children, happy children. Those we leave alone. But when a family comes with a child who's already cracked, already dangerous..." He shrugged. "The house feeds and the collection grows. That's monstrous. Is it? How many serial killers started as troubled children? How many mass shooters showed signs everyone ignored? We take them before they can bloom into true evil. We keep them contained, together, where they can't hurt anyone but each other." I wanted to argue, but part of me, the cop part that had seen what damaged children could become, understood the twisted logic. What about Timothy Crane and the others? Were they all? Timothy set fires, killed neighborhood pets. His parents brought him to that house hoping a change of scenery would help. Jedediah's voice took on a sing-song quality as he recited, Lucy Morrison drowned her baby brother in the bath. Marcus Chen pushed his sister down the stairs and laughed when she broke her neck. Jennifer Wallace put rat poison in her grandmother's tea. All of them were heading toward darkness. The house just collected them early. Chen? I said sharply. You said Marcus Chen? There are no Chens in the missing children files from this area. Jedediah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Officer, you still don't understand. The house has many doors. That basement connects to basements all over the country. Every town has a house like ours. A hungry place that collects the broken ones. The Chens lived in California, but their basement door opened to the same darkness as ours. The implications made my head spin. A network of connected haunted houses, all feeding on disturbed children, all leading to the same impossible underground chamber. I should burn them all down, I said. Others have tried. The houses always come back. Different locations, different faces, but the same hunger. You can't kill something that exists in the spaces between reality. A car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the playground. When the light faded, Jedediah was gone. Only the swing remained, still moving gently as if someone had just jumped off. I went back to my cruiser and sat there until dawn, trying to process what I'd learned. When my shift ended, I drove home and did something I hadn't done since the night in the basement. I pulled up missing children cases from across the country. The pattern was there once you knew what to look for. Troubled children, behavioral problems, early signs of violence or psychological disturbance. They'd disappear from homes with histories, places where deaths had occurred, where tragedies had accumulated. The disappearances were spread across decades, different states, different jurisdictions. Nobody had connected them because there was no logical connection to make. Except now I knew about the doors, the basements that opened onto impossible spaces, the network of hungry houses that fed on broken innocence. I started keeping a list. Every missing child case that fit the pattern. Every house with the right kind of history. I told myself I was building a case, gathering evidence. But really, I was trying to understand the scope of what we were dealing with. 3 months after the Harrington arrest, I got a call from Detective Patricia Morse in Burlington. She'd caught the Harrington case on the Vermont side and wanted to compare notes. Something's not right about this whole thing, she said over coffee at a truck stop between our jurisdictions. The parents are guilty, no question. But the boy, there's something else going on. Patricia was in her 50s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with 30 years of investigative experience. If she sensed something was off, she was probably right. What have you found? I asked carefully. Similar cases. Going back decades. Troubled children vanishing from houses with dark histories. Always the same pattern. The child is there one moment, gone the next. No trace ever found. She pulled out a file thick with photocopied reports, newspaper clippings, photographs. Look at this, she said, pointing to a picture from 1962. Robert Henley, age 8, history of animal abuse and violent outbursts, disappeared from his home in Rutland. The house had been the site of a murder-suicide in the 1940s. She flipped to another page, 1978. Emma Thornton, age 6, tried to suffocate her infant brother twice. Vanished from a house in Brattleboro where 3 children had died of scarlet fever in 1920. Page after page, the same pattern repeated. You think they're connected, I said. I know they are. I just can't explain how. She looked at me intently. But you can, can't you? You saw something in that house, something that explains all this. I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to share the burden of knowledge with someone who might understand. But I thought of Jedediah's warning, of how no one would believe the truth. I saw a deeply disturbed family covering up a murder, I said carefully. Whatever happened to Jedediah, his parents know more than they're saying. Patricia studied me for a long moment. You're lying, she said finally, but I understand why. Some truths are too dangerous to share. She gathered up her files and stood to leave, then paused. Off the record, she said quietly, I had a case 15 years ago. A boy who burned down his family's garage with the neighbor's cat inside. Classic warning signs. His parents were desperate, tried everything. Then they moved to an old house in Montpellier, and he vanished one night. No trace, no explanation. She met my eyes. I saw him 6 months later, standing outside my house at 3 a.m., looking exactly the same as the night he disappeared. He said 5 words to me. Stop looking for us. Then he was gone. Did you stop? Yes. Because I realized something that night. Some children are born with darkness in them. Maybe it's genetics, maybe it's trauma, maybe it's just random cosmic cruelty. But that darkness is real, and it grows. And maybe, just maybe, there's something out there that recognizes it and removes it before it can fully bloom. She turned to leave, then looked back one more time. We're not supposed to say this as cops, but some missing children shouldn't be found. Some doors should stay closed, and some houses. She trailed off, shaking her head. Some houses are doing us all a favor. After she left, I sat in that truck stop for another hour, staring at my cold coffee and thinking about hungry houses and broken children, and the thin line between justice and necessity. That night, I drove past the Harrington house. It had been sold already, surprisingly quickly, to a family from New York. The realtor's sign was gone, replaced by children's toys on the lawn and a minivan in the driveway. I should have felt relief. A normal family moving into a normal house. But as I watched, a small face appeared in an upstairs window. A boy, maybe 6 or 7, staring out at the street with empty eyes. I got out of my car and walked up to the door, my heart pounding. When I knocked, a woman answered, mid-30s, tired-looking, with the frazzled appearance of a stressed parent. "Can I help you, officer?" "Just doing a welfare check," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Making sure you're settling in okay." "Oh, how thoughtful." "Yes, we're fine. It's been an adjustment. Our son Billy has been having some behavioral issues, and we thought a change of scenery might help." My blood ran cold. "Behavioral issues?" She lowered her voice. "He's been hurting himself. And other things. Dead birds in his backpack, disturbing drawings. The doctors in New York recommended inpatient treatment, but my husband thinks we just need to give him more attention, more love." I looked past her to the basement door, visible at the end of the hallway. It was already open, just a crack. "Ma'am," I said urgently, "I think you should reconsider." But she was already closing the door. "Thank you for checking, officer, but we're fine. Billy's already doing better. He loves his new room, especially the closet. Says he's made new friends in there." The door closed in my face. I stood on that porch for a long moment, debating what to do. Call child services? Report suspected abuse? But report what, exactly? That the house was hungry and the boy was already marked? In the end, I did nothing. I went back to my car and drove away, adding Billy no last name given to my growing list of children who would soon disappear. Because Patricia Morse was right. Some children are born with darkness in them, and some houses are doing us all a favor. Billy disappeared 3 weeks later. The call came in at 1:23 a.m. Same pattern as always. Parents checked on their son before bed, found his room empty, window open. But this time, I was ready. I'd been parked down the street every night since meeting Billy's mother, watching, waiting. When I arrived at the scene, officially this time, the house was in chaos. Billy's mother, Grace Thompson, was hysterical. His father, Richard, was pacing the living room with his phone, demanding to speak to supervisors, threatening lawsuits if his son wasn't found immediately. "He was just there," Grace sobbed. "I checked on him at 11 and he was sleeping." How does a 6-year-old just vanish? I went through the motions, checking the room, noting the open window, calling for backup and search teams. But I also did something else. While the other officers were occupied, I went down to the basement. It looked normal. Unfinished, with exposed beams and concrete walls. The new family had already started using it for storage. Boxes labeled Christmas decorations and Billy's old toys. But in the corner, behind the furnace, I found what I was looking for. Fresh scratches on the wall. Small ones, child height. They formed words, "Thank you for not stopping us." I photographed them quickly, then went back upstairs. The search would continue for weeks, but Billy Thompson would never be found. His parents would appear on the news, pleading for his return. They'd offer rewards, hire private investigators, chase down every lead. They'd never mention the dead animals he'd hidden under his bed, or the neighbor's cat that had gone missing the day before he vanished. Those details didn't fit the narrative of the innocent lost child. 6 months passed. The Harrington trial made national news. Parents who murdered their disabled infant and gaslit their son into madness. Temperance got life without parole. Silas got 40 years. Neither of them ever stopped insisting that something supernatural had taken Jedediah, but their lawyers wisely kept that out of the official defense. I thought about quitting the force a dozen times. How could I keep doing this job knowing what I knew? How could I respond to missing child calls when I knew some of those children needed to stay missing? The answer came to me on another humid August night, exactly 1 year after the Harrington case. I was called to a domestic disturbance at a rental property on Maple Street. When I arrived, I found a family in crisis. The father, Harold Jacobson, had barricaded himself in his daughter's room with the 8-year-old girl. The mother, Beatrice, was outside the door, pleading with him to let her in. "She's sick," Harold was shouting. "Something's wrong with her." Look at what she wrote. I managed to talk him into opening the door. Inside, the walls were covered in crayon drawings, violent, disturbing images of dismembered animals and human figures with their faces scratched out. But what made my blood run cold were the words written over and over in red crayon. "The house is calling. The children are waiting. Let me go home." The girl, Melody, sat on her bed, humming to herself and coloring another picture. This one showed a house with a dark basement and children standing in circles underground. "She's never been to any house like that," Beatrice whispered. "We just moved here from Texas." She's never been to Connecticut before, but I recognized the house in her drawing. It was the Harrington place. "Has Melody been having behavioral problems?" I asked carefully. The parents exchanged glances. "Some issues," Harold admitted. "She's been diagnosed with conduct disorder. There were some incidents at her last school, but nothing like this. This started 3 days ago, out of nowhere." I knelt down next to Melody. "Hi, sweetheart. Can you tell me about your pictures?" She looked up at me with bright, intelligent eyes that held no warmth. "They visit me at night, the other children. They say there's a place for kids like me." Kids who see things differently. What things do you see differently? She smiled, and it was the smile of someone much older. I see that people are just meat that hasn't stopped moving yet. I see that pain is the only real thing. I see that love is just a word people use to control each other. Her parents gasped. Beatrice started crying. But I'd heard similar words before, from other children who'd disappeared. "Do the children tell you where this place is?" I asked. Melody nodded and pointed out her window. In the distance, just visible through the trees, was the roof of the Harrington house. "They say the door will open for me soon. They say I just have to wait until the family there is ready." The Thompsons still lived there. Billy had been gone 6 months, but they'd stayed, convinced he'd been kidnapped and might return home. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't save the children who were already marked, but maybe I could save the families they'd leave behind. I started visiting the Thompsons regularly, welfare checks that became coffee visits that became something like friendship. Slowly, carefully, I convinced them to move. Told them the house had too many painful memories. Helped them find a new place 2 towns over. The day they moved out, I saw Jedediah standing in the upstairs window, watching. He nodded to me once, then disappeared. The house stood empty for 3 months before the next family moved in. The Washingtons, a young couple with twin boys, age 5. Normal kids, by all accounts. Happy, healthy, no behavioral issues. The house let them be. They lived there for 2 years without incident. The father got promoted. The mother started a successful online business. The twins thrived in school. The house remained just a house. Then the Brennans moved in next door, and everything changed. They had a daughter, Lucy, age 7. I knew within minutes of meeting her that she was marked. The way she dissected insects while maintaining eye contact with me. The way she smiled when her mother mentioned their previous cat had run away. The way she kept looking at the Washingtons' twins like they were puzzles to solve. 3 weeks after the Brennans moved in, Lucy disappeared. But this time, something went wrong. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. Not from the Brennans, but from the Washingtons. Their twins were missing. I arrived to find chaos. 4 families on the street reported missing children, all between the ages of 5 and 9, all taken from their beds. But only Lucy Brennan fit the profile of a troubled child. The others were normal kids. A boy who loved soccer, twin girls who did ballet, a kid who collected Pokemon cards. The house had made a mistake. Or maybe it hadn't been the house at all. I found them in Millbrook Elementary School's basement. All 5 children, sitting in a circle, holding hands, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. Lucy Brennan was leading them, her eyes solid black, her voice layered with harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat. "You're early, Officer Blackthorne," she said without looking up. "The ceremony isn't complete. Let them go, Lucy. The house only takes the broken ones. These children don't belong to it." She laughed, that familiar sound of breaking glass. "The house? Oh, officer, you still don't understand. The house was never in control. We were." She stood, and the other children stood with her, their movements perfectly synchronized. Every generation, a few children are born different, wrong. We recognize each other, we find each other, and we've learned that if we feed the darkness enough normal children, it grows strong enough to let us come and go as we please. Jedediah said you only take the troubled ones. Jedediah was new, naive. He believed what the older ones told him. But Timothy Crane knows better. He's been feeding the darkness for 36 years. He's learned that innocent blood tastes sweeter. I drew my weapon, though I knew it was useless. Let them go. Or what? You'll shoot a 7-year-old girl in front of witnesses? She gestured to the other children. They're awake, you know. Aware. They'll remember everything. Even if you save them, they'll never be the same. They've seen behind the curtain. They know what waits in the dark. She was right. Even if I got them out, the trauma would mark them forever. They'd grow up different, damaged. Some might even become like Lucy, like Jedediah, like all the others. There has to be another way, I said. Lucy tilted her head. There is. Join us. What? You've been touched by the darkness, officer. Ever since that night in the basement. It recognizes you. It wants you. Think of the authority you could bring. A police officer who could make troublesome children disappear officially. No more messy investigations. No more grieving parents on the news. Just quiet, efficient collection. You're insane. Am I? How many child killers have you arrested? How many broken families have you seen? How many times have you arrived too late to save anyone? Join us, and you'll never be too late again. You'll be preventing the crimes before they happen. The other children started chanting again, their voices rising and falling in that impossible harmony. The fluorescent lights flickered, the temperature dropped, and in that moment I felt it, the hunger. Not from the house or the darkness, but from inside myself. The exhaustion of fighting a losing battle, the temptation to just give in, to become part of the system instead of fighting against it. Then I thought of Emily, my daughter in college, thought of her as a child, innocent and trusting, thought of all the normal children who deserved to grow up without being food for some ancient hunger. I made my choice. I didn't shoot Lucy. Instead, I shot the electrical panel. The basement plunged into darkness. The children screamed, normal, terrified screams. I heard them scatter, running in different directions. I followed the sound, grabbing them one by one, carrying them up the stairs into the pre-dawn light. 4 children saved. But Lucy was gone. I found her 3 hours later at the Harrington house. She was standing in the backyard, staring at the basement door. Jedediah was with her, along with Timothy Crane and a dozen other children I recognized from missing posters spanning decades. You made your choice, Jedediah said sadly. Now we make ours. They walked into the basement together, and I heard the door lock behind them. When the other officers arrived, the basement was empty. Just concrete and storage boxes. The 4 rescued children were returned to their families. They remembered nothing clearly, just nightmares and fragments. Therapy helped mostly. They grew up, went to college, had families of their own. Normal lives, or close enough. Lucy Brennan was never found. Her parents moved away within a month. The house on Elm Grove Lane was eventually demolished. The land turned into a small park. Children play there now, laughing and running, never knowing what lies beneath. But I know. I'll always know. I retired from the force last month after 20 years of service. They gave me a medal, a pension, a nice speech about dedication to public safety. They never knew about my real job, the watching, the waiting, the careful interventions that kept the wrong families from moving into the wrong houses. Patricia Morse took over that duty. She has her own list now, her own network of watchers. We meet once a month, share information, compare notes. There are more of us than you'd think. Cops, social workers, teachers, people who've seen behind the curtain and chosen to stand guard. The houses are still out there, still hungry, still collecting the broken children. And somewhere, in basements that don't exist, in rooms that shouldn't be, those children play their endless games. Some, like Jedediah, might be saving us from future monsters. Others, like Lucy, might be becoming monsters themselves. I don't know which is worse. All I know is that every night when I close my eyes, I hear them laughing. Sometimes it sounds like children playing. Sometimes it sounds like something else entirely. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, I hear my radio crackle with static that forms words. Thank you for your service, Officer Blackthorne. The children are satisfied. For now. I've started leaving my radio on, just in case they need to tell me something. Just in case another child goes missing. Just in case the hunger grows too strong and they need someone who understands to stop them. Because that's the real horror, isn't it? Not that there are monsters who take children, but that sometimes we need them to. Sometimes the darkness serves a purpose, and sometimes the only difference between a protector and a predator is which side of the basement door you're standing on. The Harrington case officially remains unsolved. Jedediah is still listed as missing, presumed dead. His parents will die in prison, never knowing if their son is alive or dead, saved or damned. Maybe that's justice. Maybe it's cruelty. Maybe it's both. All I know is that tomorrow night another child will disappear. Maybe they'll be troubled, marked for collection by forces older than memory. Maybe they'll be innocent, taken by mistake or malice. Either way, someone will have to decide, do we look for them? Do we want to find them? And if we do find them, what then? These are the questions that keep me awake at night. These are the thoughts that make me check my locks twice and keep a light on in every room. Because now I know the truth. Every basement is potentially a doorway. Every troubled child is potentially a gateway. And every missing child case has two possible endings, tragedy or mercy. The hard part is knowing which is which. The hardest part is living with the choices you make. And the absolute hardest part, knowing that somewhere, in a darkness that exists between spaces, Jedediah Harrington is still 7 years old, still wearing his dinosaur pajamas, still smiling that too wide smile, still waiting for the next child to join their eternal playdate. The first time Cordelia Ashworth walked into our precinct, I barely noticed her. It was a Tuesday night in September, around 9:15 p.m., and I was just starting my graveyard shift at the Riverside Police Department in Indiana. Officer Thaddeus Grimm, that's me. 15 years on the force. 12 of them working nights because I preferred the strange calm that came with darkness. I was at my desk, filling out paperwork from a drunk and disorderly arrest earlier that evening, when she approached the front desk. She was maybe 32, 33 years old, dressed in business casual like she'd come straight from an office job. Brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, minimal makeup, the kind of person who would blend into any crowd. But there was something about the way she kept looking over her shoulder, the way her hands trembled slightly as she filled out the complaint form, that made me pay attention. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I asked, walking over to the front desk where Officer Janet Mills was taking her statement. Cordelia looked up at me with exhausted eyes. "I need to file a stalking complaint. This has been going on for 3 months, and it's escalating." I grabbed a notepad and led her to one of the interview rooms. Small, windowless, with that distinctive smell of industrial disinfectant and old coffee that every police station in America seems to have. "Start from the beginning," I said, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair across from her. "Tell me everything." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "His name is Barnabas Crane. We dated for about 6 months last year. I broke it off in May when he became possessive, controlling. He didn't take it well." "How so?" "At first just texts, dozens a day, calling me at work, showing up at my gym, my grocery store, my sister's house. I blocked his number, but he got new ones. I changed my routines, but he always found me. Did you file a restraining order? She laughed bitterly. I tried. The judge said mean texts and showing up in public places wasn't enough for a protective order. Said I needed proof of a credible threat. I'd heard this story too many times. The system failing people until it was too late. What changed? You said it was escalating. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly, and showed me a photo. It was her bedroom, clearly taken from outside her window at night. She was visible in the shot, getting ready for bed, unaware she was being photographed. He sent this to me yesterday from another new number, with a message. She swiped to show me the text. You look peaceful when you sleep. Like an angel. My angel. My jaw tightened. This had crossed a line. There's more, she continued, swiping through her phone. He's been leaving things at my door. Flowers at first, then jewelry I'd returned to him when we broke up. Last week, it was this. The photo showed a dead bird, placed carefully on her doormat, surrounded by rose petals in the shape of a heart. Do you have security cameras? I installed them 2 weeks ago, but somehow nothing ever shows up on the footage. It's like he knows exactly where the blind spots are. What about your neighbors? Has anyone seen him? That's the thing, she said, leaning forward. My neighbor, Mr. Hezekiah Pound, he's in his 70s, lives across the hall. He swears he's seen Barnabas in the building multiple times, but whenever I call the police, he's gone by the time they arrive. I made detailed notes. Everything she was describing was textbook stalker escalation, the kind that too often ended in violence. Where does Barnabas live? I asked. I don't know anymore. He was evicted from his apartment 2 months ago. Lost his job around the same time. His family lives in Ohio, but they haven't heard from him in weeks. Ms. Ashworth, I want you to know I'm taking this seriously. I'm going to personally investigate this starting tonight. In the meantime, do you have somewhere safe you can stay? She shook her head. I can't keep running. I've already changed apartments twice. He always finds me. It's like he has some kind of supernatural ability to know where I am at all times. I didn't believe in the supernatural, but I'd seen enough stalking cases to know that obsessed individuals could seem almost omniscient in their surveillance of victims. Let me get your current address. I'll do a welfare check tonight and increase patrols in your area. She wrote it down. 1428 Sycamore Heights, apartment 3B. A decent neighborhood, good lighting, the kind of place that should have been safe. After she left, I pulled up Barnabas Crane in our system. His record was disturbing. 3 previous complaints from different women over the past 5 years, though none had resulted in charges. A brief stint in psychiatric hold after what was described as a mental health crisis 2 years ago. His driver's license photo showed a thin man with intense dark eyes and prematurely graying hair, though he was only 35. I decided to start my shift with a drive-by of Cordelia's apartment. The building was a converted Victorian mansion, now split into 6 units. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, windows facing the street. As I sat in my cruiser, observing, I noticed movement in the alley beside the building. I got out quietly, hand on my weapon, and moved toward the alley. A figure was climbing the fire escape, moving with practiced ease. When he reached the 3rd floor, he stopped outside what I realized must be Cordelia's window. "Police! Stop right there!" I shouted. The figure froze, then slowly turned. Even in the dim light, I recognized Barnabas Crane from his photo. But something was off. His eyes, when they caught the streetlight, seemed to reflect it like an animal's. "Good evening, officer." He peered at my badge, though he was 30 feet away and it was dark. Grim. How appropriate. "Mr. Crane, Climb down slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." He smiled, and I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth. "I'm not doing anything illegal, officer. Just enjoying the night air. You're trespassing and violating a harassment complaint. Come down now." "Harassment?" He laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "I'm protecting her. You have no idea what's hunting her. What's been hunting her since before I ever met her. Sir, I need you to—" He moved, faster than anyone should be able to move. One moment he was on the fire escape. The next he was dropping past me in the alley, landing in a crouch that should have broken his legs. Instead, he stood smoothly and started walking away. I ran after him, calling for backup. Suspect fleeing on foot, heading north on Sycamore. But when I rounded the corner, he was gone. Not hiding, not running, just gone. The street was empty except for a confused-looking man walking his dog. "Did you see someone run past here?" I asked, breathing hard. The man shook his head. "Nobody's come this way, officer. I've been walking up and down this block for 10 minutes. I searched for another hour. Nothing. It was like Barnabas Crane had simply vanished into thin air. When I finally made it up to Cordelia's apartment to check on her, she was understandably terrified. He was here? At my window? She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. I chased him off. But Miss Ashworth, there's something unusual about this situation. Has Barnabas ever displayed any unusual abilities?" She looked at me strangely. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd seen without sounding insane? He seemed to move very quickly. And he disappeared in a way that doesn't make sense. Her face paled. He always joked that his family was cursed. Said they had old blood, whatever that means. I thought he was just being dramatic. But sometimes... She trailed off. Sometimes what? Sometimes things would happen around him. Electronics would malfunction. Animals would act strange, either terrified or weirdly drawn to him. And his eyes, in certain light, they looked wrong. Like they weren't human. I should have dismissed this as nonsense, but I'd seen those eyes myself. Seen him drop 3 stories and walk away. Seen him vanish into nothing. "I'm going to stay close tonight," I told her. "Lock your doors and windows. If anything happens, call 911 immediately." I spent the rest of my shift parked outside her building. Around 3 a.m., my radio crackled with static. Through the white noise, I heard a voice, not dispatch, but something else. "She belongs to us, Officer Grimm. She has always belonged to us. Barnabas is just trying to save her, but you won't let him. That makes you the enemy." I grabbed the radio. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." Static. Then, "We are the Watchers. The Hunters. The ones who claim what was promised. Cordelia's bloodline owes us a debt. 300 years overdue. Barnabas thought he could protect her by claiming her first, but love is not stronger than blood oath." The radio went dead. Completely dead. No power, nothing. I looked up at Cordelia's window and saw shadows moving inside. Multiple shadows, though I knew she lived alone. I ran into the building, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Her door was locked. I pounded on it. "Miss Ashworth! Cordelia! Open up!" No response. I could hear movement inside. Furniture being moved, something breaking. I kicked the door. It took 3 tries before the deadbolt gave way and I burst in. The apartment was in chaos. Furniture overturned, pictures fallen from walls, and in the center of the living room, Cordelia stood perfectly still. Her eyes rolled back so only the whites showed. Around her, forming a circle, were figures in dark clothing, their faces hidden by deep hoods. "Police! Nobody move!" The figures turned toward me in unison. Under their hoods, their eyes glowed a deep red. "Officer Grimm," they spoke in harmony, their voices layered and wrong. "You're interrupting a collection 3 centuries in the making." "Let her go," I commanded, weapon drawn, though I suspected it would be useless. "She made a bargain," they said. "Her ancestor, Prudence Ashworth, in 1724. Power and wealth in exchange for the 7th daughter of the 7th generation. Cordelia is that daughter." "That's insane. Contracts from 300 years ago aren't legally binding." They laughed, that same glass-grinding sound Barnabas had made. "We don't follow your laws, officer. We follow older ones." Suddenly, Barnabas was there. I didn't see him enter. He just appeared, standing between Cordelia and the hooded figures. "You can't have her," he said, his voice different now, deeper, more primal. "I've marked her. She's under my protection." "A lesser demon's mark means nothing to us, Barnabas Crane." The figures hissed. "Your family's pitiful curse gives you no authority here." Lesser demon? My mind reeled, trying to process what I was witnessing. "Maybe not," Barnabas said, and his form began to change. His fingers elongated into claws, his teeth sharpened, his eyes burned bright yellow. "But I'll die before I let you take her." "So be it." What happened next defied every law of physics I knew. The hooded figures moved like smoke, flowing around the room. Barnabas met them with inhuman speed and strength, his claws raking through their robes, which bled darkness instead of blood. The air itself seemed to tear, revealing glimpses of somewhere else, a place of fire and shadow and things that should not exist. I stood frozen, my rational mind trying to reject what my eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a hallucination, a gas leak, something. One of the figures flew past me, thrown by Barnabas, and crashed into the wall. Its hood fell back, revealing a face that was human-shaped but wrong. Too many angles, skin like polished obsidian, mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. "Officer Grimm!" Barnabas shouted, now fully transformed into something between man and beast. "The book! On her nightstand. Read the words!" I ran to the bedroom, dodging as furniture flew through the air propelled by invisible forces. On the nightstand was an ancient-looking leather journal, open to a page covered in symbols I didn't recognize. "I can't read this," I shouted. "Sound them out. The words will come." Having no better option, I started trying to pronounce the symbols. As I did, they seemed to shift, becoming almost readable. Words in a language I didn't know flowed from my mouth. "By blood and bone, by oath and stone, I call upon the ancient law. No claim is valid that love would flaw. The mark of protection, freely given, makes void the debt and balance riven." The room exploded with white light. When my vision cleared, the hooded figures were gone. Barnabas was human again, bleeding from dozens of wounds, and Cordelia was unconscious on the floor. I called for backup and medical, not sure how I'd explain any of this, but when they arrived, there was no evidence of what had occurred. The apartment was normal, undamaged. Cordelia had no memory of the evening, and Barnabas had vanished again. The official report stated that I'd responded to a noise complaint, found Ms. Ashworth had fallen and hit her head, and provided assistance until EMTs arrived. Nobody questioned it. Nobody wanted to. But I knew the truth, and worse, I knew it wasn't over. The next night, Cordelia showed up at the station again. This time, she remembered everything. "They'll come back, won't they?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I think so," I admitted. But so will Barnabas. He's not stalking you. He's protecting you. From demons. Because my ancestor made a deal with demons. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. And my stalker ex-boyfriend is actually some kind of lesser demon himself, trying to save me through the power of love. That seems to be the situation, yes. This is insane. Yes. We sat in silence for a moment. "What do I do?" she finally asked. "I don't know, but I'm going to help you figure it out. Whatever those things were, they operate in my jurisdiction. That makes this my problem too." She looked at me with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "You're going to fight demons for me? Why?" "Because I took an oath to protect and serve." Doesn't say anything about only protecting from human threats. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, my life has become something out of a horror movie. The hooded figures, I've learned they're called the Collectors, have made 2 more attempts to take Cordelia. Each time, Barnabas has appeared to fight them off. Each time, I've had to help, learning more about this hidden world of ancient debts and inhuman entities. I've started researching, digging into old town records, genealogies, occult histories. What I've found is terrifying. Riverside isn't just a normal town. It's built on what occultists call a threshold, a place where the barrier between our world and others is thin. The Ashworth family weren't the only ones to make deals with entities from beyond. Half the founding families of this town have similar contracts, similar debts. And now, with the 7th generation coming of age, those debts are being called in. Cordelia isn't the only one being hunted. In the past 3 weeks, we've had 6 missing persons cases, all descendants of founding families, all around Cordelia's age. All vanished without a trace. The pattern is clear. Something is collecting on old debts, and Riverside is ground zero for whatever's coming. Last night, Hezekiah Pound, Cordelia's elderly neighbor, knocked on my cruiser window while I was doing my regular patrol of her street. When I rolled it down, his usually gentle face was grave. "You need to know something, Officer Grimm," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not just a neighbor. I'm a watcher. Have been for 60 years, placed here by the Order to monitor the Ashworth line." "The Order?" "The Order of the Silver Dawn. We've been fighting the Collectors for centuries, trying to prevent them from claiming the descendants. But we're losing. They're getting stronger, bolder. Why tell me this now? Because you've been marked. The moment you read from that book, you became part of this. The Collectors see you as an enemy now. They'll come for you too." As if to emphasize his point, my radio crackled to life. That same layered voice from before, Officer Thaddeus Grimm. "You have interfered with collection twice. There will not be a third time. Surrender Cordelia Ashworth, or become collection yourself." I looked at Hezekiah. "Let them come. I've got a job to do." He smiled sadly. Brave words. "But you don't understand what you're up against. The Collectors aren't just demons. They're the universe's way of maintaining balance. Every deal made, every power granted must be paid for. They're not evil. They're inevitable." "Nothing's inevitable," I said. "There's always a way to fight." "Perhaps," he said, "but the cost is often higher than you'd think. Ask Barnabas. Ask him what he really gave up to gain the power to protect Cordelia." With that, he walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. The next night, I decided to confront Barnabas directly. I'd been tracking his patterns for weeks, and I'd noticed he always appeared at St. Augustine's Cemetery around 2 a.m. It was an old graveyard on the edge of town, dating back to the 1700s. Probably not a coincidence given everything I'd learned about Riverside's history. I found him sitting on a weathered headstone, looking more tired than any 35-year-old should. In the moonlight, without his demonic features, he looked almost normal. Almost. "Officer Grimm," he said without looking up. "I wondered when you'd come." "We need to talk," I said, keeping my hand near my weapon out of habit, though I knew it would be useless against him. "About Cordelia? Or about what I am?" "Both." "Start with what you are." He laughed, but it was sad rather than menacing. "I'm what happens when your ancestor makes a deal with a lesser demon for artistic talent. My great-great-grandfather, Josiah Crane, was a failed painter. Desperate for success, he summoned a demon named Marcosius and traded his family's humanity for skill. He became famous, wealthy, celebrated, and every generation since has carried the curse. You're a demon? Part demon, part human, caught between worlds belonging to neither. Strong enough to fight the collectors, but not strong enough to defeat them permanently, and cursed with very human emotions, including the capacity to fall in love. With Cordelia. I didn't know about her debt when we met. She was just a beautiful woman at a coffee shop who laughed at my terrible jokes. By the time I learned about the Ashworth curse, it was too late. I was already in love. I sat down on a nearby headstone, the cold granite seeping through my uniform. "Hezekiah said you gave something up to protect her. What was it?" Barnabas finally looked at me, and I saw centuries of pain in his eyes. "My mortality. Whatever humanity I had left. Every time I fight the collectors, I become less human, more demon. Eventually, I'll be just like them, a creature of pure purpose, no emotion, no love. But by then, Cordelia will be safe, or dead of natural causes. Either way, my job will be done. That's why you stalked her after the breakup. You were trying to protect her without her knowing. The collectors were already circling. I could smell them on her, see their marks in the air around her. I tried to stay away, to let her live a normal life, but they were getting closer. So yes, I watched, I followed. I made sure she was never alone long enough for them to take her. The dead bird, the creepy messages, he winced. Not me. That was them. Trying to destabilize her, make her vulnerable. Fear weakens the barriers between worlds, makes collection easier. "So, you're the good guy in this?" "There are no good guys, officer. There are just choices and consequences. I chose to save the woman I love, and the consequence is losing my soul piece by piece." A cold wind swept through the cemetery, and with it came a familiar presence. Hezekiah Pound emerged from behind a mausoleum, but he looked different. Younger, stronger, and his eyes held an ancient weight. "Hello, Barnabas," he said. "Officer Grimm." "You're not really just a neighbor, are you?" I asked. "I told you, I'm with the Order of the Silver Dawn. We've been fighting this war for centuries." He pulled out an old leather journal, similar to the one I'd read from in Cordelia's apartment. "This contains the true history of Riverside. Every deal, every debt, every family's dark secret." He handed it to me. The leather was worn smooth by countless hands, and it felt warm, almost alive. "Page 247, he said. "The Ashworth contract." I flipped to the page. The text was in Old English, but I could make out the basics. Prudence Ashworth, accused of witchcraft, about to be burned at the stake, made a deal for her freedom and her family's prosperity. In exchange, the seventh daughter of the seventh generation would be given to the collectors to serve in the realm beyond. "Cordelia doesn't have children," I noted. "She's not a seventh daughter." "Count again," Hezekiah said. The Ashworth women have been very careful about hiding their pregnancies, their losses, secret adoptions, hidden graves. Cordelia is the seventh daughter, though she doesn't know it. Her mother had 6 miscarriages before her, all girls, all deliberately hidden from the records. Jesus, I muttered. He has nothing to do with this, Barnabas said dryly. This is older magic, deeper, the kind that predates organized religion. So, what can we do? I asked. How do we break the contract? You can't break it, Hezekiah said. But you can fulfill it differently. The contract says Cordelia must be given to the collectors. It doesn't specify in what capacity. What do you mean? There's a ritual, Barnabas said slowly. A way to make her a collector herself instead of a collection. She'd have to gather souls, enforce contracts, become part of their system, but she'd retain her consciousness, her free will. That's monstrous, I said. It's better than the alternative, Hezekiah countered. Collections are consumed, their essence used to power the collector's realm. At least, as a collector, she'd exist. There has to be another way. There is, a new voice said from the darkness. We all turned. Cordelia stood at the cemetery entrance, and she wasn't alone. Behind her were 5 other people, all around her age, all with the same haunted look in their eyes. The other descendants, I realized. Cordelia nodded. We found each other. Started comparing notes. Our families all made similar deals, all coming due now. But we discovered something the collectors don't want us to know. She pulled out a modern tablet, incongruous in the ancient cemetery. On it was displayed a complex family tree with interconnected lines between all the founding families. We're all related, she said. Distant cousins, but related. The original families intermarried over the centuries, which means we're not 7 separate debts, we're one debt, multiplied. I don't understand, I said. One of the other descendants, a young man with prematurely white hair, stepped forward. The contracts were written in old magical law. Under that law, blood debts can be combined if the debtors share blood. We can pool our debt and pay it as one. 1 soul instead of 7? Barnabas asked, his eyes widening. Who would? We draw lots, Cordelia said firmly. It's fair. One of us goes, the rest go free, and our family lines are released from all future obligations. No, I said immediately, we're not sacrificing anyone. It's not your choice, Officer Grimm, Cordelia said gently. We've already decided. Tomorrow night at the new moon, we perform the ritual. One way or another, this ends. The collectors won't accept this, Hezekiah warned. They prefer 7 souls to 1. They'll have to, the white-haired man said. We've hired a lawyer. I blinked. A lawyer? A contract lawyer who specializes in supernatural agreements, Cordelia explained. Turns out there's a whole underground legal system for this stuff. Who knew? Despite everything, I found myself laughing. You're going to fight demons with legal technicalities? If it works, it works, she shrugged. But Barnabas wasn't laughing. This is dangerous. If the ritual goes wrong, all 7 of you could be taken, and anyone nearby could be caught in the crossfire. Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong, Cordelia said, looking directly at him. Will you help us? The pain in his eyes was obvious. You know I will. Even if I draw the short straw? Even if you have to watch me be taken? Even then, he whispered, because it would be your choice. And that's more than most people get. The next 24 hours were a blur of preparation. Hezekiah contacted other members of the order, gathering protective artifacts and ritual components. Barnabas scouted the ritual site, an abandoned church on the outskirts of town where the veil between worlds was thinnest. The descendants worked with their supernatural lawyer, a surprisingly normal-looking woman named Margaret Thorne, to prepare the legal argument. And I did what cops do. I secured the perimeter, set up roadblocks to keep civilians away, and prepared for the worst. The night of the new moon was darker than any I'd experienced. Even with flashlights, the darkness seemed to eat the light, leaving us in a bubble of visibility surrounded by infinite black. The abandoned church looked like something from a horror movie. Roof partially collapsed, windows broken, vines growing through the walls. But inside, Hezekiah and his people had created a circle of protection. Salt, silver, and symbols I didn't recognize. The 7 descendants stood in the center, each holding a slip of paper. 1 marked, 6 blank. They would draw at midnight when the veil was thinnest. At 11:45, the collectors arrived. They didn't walk in. They materialized from the shadows, dozens of them, their red eyes glowing in the darkness. The temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly. "This is irregular," they said in their layered voice. 7 debts cannot become one. Margaret Thorne stepped forward, looking remarkably calm for someone facing demons. According to the Covenant of Shadows, subsection 7, paragraph 3, blood debts of shared lineage can be consolidated if all parties agree. They do not share sufficient blood. They do, Margaret interrupted, pulling out a thick folder of documentation. DNA tests, genealogical records, magical blood traces. All 7 share a common ancestor, Elias Riverside, the town's founder. They're all cousins within 7 degrees of separation. The collectors were silent for a moment, conferring in a language that hurt to hear. "Even if we accept this interpretation," they finally said, "the chosen soul must come willingly, no coercion." "Agreed," Cordelia said. "We draw lots. The chosen one goes willingly, or the deal is void. If the chosen one refuses, all 7 are forfeit." "Also agreed." The clock on the wall, somehow still working despite the church being abandoned for decades, began to chime midnight. The descendants reached into an old hat Hezekiah had provided. One by one, they pulled out their papers. 6 blank pieces fell to the ground. Cordelia held the marked one. "No!" Barnabas roared, his human form rippling as his demon side fought to emerge. "I won't let you—" "Stop," Cordelia said calmly. "This is my choice." She looked at the collectors. "I'll come. But I have conditions." The collectors tilted their hooded heads. "You are in no position to negotiate." "Actually, I am," she said, "because if I refuse now, you get nothing. The ritual is broken. The contracts are void due to breach of terms. You need me to come willingly. So, here are my terms." She pulled out a paper, not the lottery slip, but a prepared document. 1. My death releases all blood debts for all 7 family lines in perpetuity. 2. Barnabas Crane is released from his family curse. 3. Officer Thaddeus Grimm receives protection from all supernatural threats for the remainder of his natural life. 4. The town of Riverside becomes neutral ground. No collections, no deals, no supernatural interference for 100 years. The collectors hissed. "Impossible. Too much for one soul." "Then we have no deal, and you've wasted centuries of planning for nothing." Margaret Thorne stepped forward again. "My client's terms are more than reasonable, given the compound interest on 7 300-year-old contracts. Would you like me to calculate the exact soul value with standard metaphysical inflation rates?" I watched this surreal negotiation with a mixture of awe and horror. They were haggling over Cordelia's soul like it was a used car. Finally, the lead collector spoke. "We accept the first 3 terms. The 4th is modified. Riverside becomes neutral ground for 50 years, not 100. 75, Cordelia countered. $60. Deal. The collector extended one shadowy hand. Cordelia reached out to shake it. "Wait," I shouted. Everyone turned to look at me. "There's another way." "Officer Grimm," Hezekiah warned. "Don't." "The contracts are for the 7th daughter of the 7th generation, right?" "What if Cordelia isn't the 7th daughter anymore?" "What are you talking about?" Margaret asked. I pulled out my phone, showing them a document I'd been researching all day. Cordelia has a cousin, born 3 days after her, given up for adoption. Rebecca Ashworth, now Rebecca Stone, lives in California. She's technically the 7th daughter, not Cordelia. The collectors went very still. "This changes nothing. The bloodline specifies the 7th daughter," I interrupted. "Not the 7th born, the 7th daughter. If Rebecca is legally recognized as an Ashworth, she becomes the 7th. And she's not here. She's not part of this ritual." That's insane," Margaret said, but she was already pulling out her laptop. "But legally, my God, it might work." "You would condemn an innocent woman to save Cordelia?" the lead collector asked. "No," I said, "because Rebecca Stone died in a car accident 6 months ago. Check your records." The collectors fell silent. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. "If she's dead," Cordelia said slowly, understanding dawning on her face, "then the contract can never be fulfilled. The 7th daughter can't be collected if she doesn't exist." "This is trickery," the collectors roared. The church shook, dust falling from the rafters. "This is law," Margaret said firmly. "Your own law. The contract specifies the 7th daughter. If she's dead, the contract is void." The collectors turned to each other, conferring in their painful language. Finally, they turned back to us. "We will verify this claim. If the 7th daughter is truly dead, then the Ashworth debt is void, but the other 6 remain." "Actually," Margaret said, smiling now, "about that. Given that you've accepted the principle of consolidated debt, and given that 1/7 of that debt is now void, we'll need to recalculate the remaining obligations." What followed was 3 hours of the most bizarre negotiation I'd ever witnessed. Margaret Thorne earned every penny of her fee, using arcane contract law to reduce the debts, defer payments, and add so many conditional clauses that by the end, the collectors were practically begging to settle. The final agreement: each of the 6 remaining descendants would provide 1 year of service to the collectors, but not as collections. They would work as researchers, helping to modernize the collectors' ancient tracking systems. They'd work from Earth, maintain their human lives, and receive what amounted to supernatural hazard pay. "It's like supernatural community service," one of the descendants muttered. As the sun began to rise, the collectors prepared to leave. The lead one turned to me. "You have made an enemy today, Officer Grimm. We do not forget." "Get in line," I said. "I'm a cop." "I've got plenty of enemies." They vanished with the first ray of sunlight, leaving us exhausted but alive in the ruined church. Cordelia collapsed into Barnabas's arms, finally allowing herself to cry. "It's over. It's really over." "Not quite," Barnabas said. "There's still my curse." "Actually," Hezekiah said, pulling out another ancient book, "about that. The collectors agreed to release you as part of the negotiation. But removing a demon curse, that's going to require a different kind of ritual." "What kind?" Barnabas asked warily. "The painful kind," Hezekiah admitted. "But survivable. Probably." As we walked out of the church into the morning light, Cordelia took my hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for believing, for fighting, for finding that loophole." "Just doing my job," I said. She laughed. Your job description covers fighting demons now? Apparently, though I doubt the department will give me hazard pay for it. Officer Grimm, Margaret Thorne called out, getting into her very normal-looking Honda Civic. A word of advice? Start keeping very detailed records of everything supernatural you encounter. You're going to need them. Why? Because the collectors were right. You've made enemies, but you've also made allies. The supernatural world knows your name now. It's either very good or very bad, depending on how you handle it. She drove away, leaving me standing in the dawn light with a group of exhausted demon fighters and one partially demonic ex-boyfriend who was about to undergo a potentially fatal exorcism. Just another Thursday in Riverside, Indiana. The ritual to remove Barnabas's curse was scheduled for the next new moon, giving us a month to prepare. During that time, life tried to return to normal, but normal had lost all meaning. I still worked my graveyard shifts, still responded to domestic disputes and drunk drivers, but now I also saw the shadows that moved wrong, heard the whispers and static, noticed the people who weren't quite people. Cordelia went back to work at the marketing firm, though she now wore protective amulets that Hezekiah had given her. She and Barnabas were trying to figure out their relationship. Not easy when one partner is part demon and spent months stalking the other, even with good intentions. It's like the world's worst romantic comedy, she told me over coffee one night at the station. Boy meets girl, boy turns out to be demon, girl turns out to be cursed. They fight supernatural debt collectors together. Netflix would never buy it. Too unbelievable, I agreed. 2 weeks into our month of preparation, things started going wrong. It began small, electronics malfunctioning around me, shadows following me home, whispers in languages I didn't understand coming from my radio. Then it escalated. The first real incident happened on a Tuesday night. I was responding to a routine noise complaint at an apartment complex when my cruiser died. Not just the engine, everything. Battery dead, radio dead, even my flashlight wouldn't work. I got out to check under the hood when I heard them. Footsteps. Dozens of them, surrounding me in the darkness. But when I turned, nothing was there. Just empty parking lot and the distant sound of TVs from the apartments. "Officer Grimm," a voice said directly behind me. I spun around to find a woman standing there, tall, pale, with eyes that reflected the streetlight like a cat's. She was dressed in an expensive business suit that looked wildly out of place at 2 a.m. in a parking lot. "I am Magistrate Thorne of the Supernatural Oversight Committee," she said. "We need to discuss your recent interference in collection protocols." "The collectors already threatened me. Take a number." She smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "The collectors are crude, old-fashioned. We represent a more modern approach to supernatural governance. Think of us as the HR department of the hidden world. And what does supernatural HR want with me? You've shown remarkable adaptability to supernatural situations. We could use someone like you, someone with a foot in both worlds. Not interested. You haven't heard our offer. Full protection from all supernatural threats. A salary that would make your current paycheck look like pocket change. And most importantly, the power to actually help people, instead of just responding to calls after it's too late." I had to admit it was tempting, but I'd learned to be suspicious of too-good-to-be-true offers. "What's the catch?" "You'd have to leave your current life behind. New identity, new location. Cut all ties with Riverside and everyone in it, including Cordelia and the others. Especially them. They're anomalies now. Humans who've slipped through the cracks of ancient contracts. They'll be watched, studied, possibly contained if they become problematic." then my answer is definitely no. Her pleasant expression didn't change, but the temperature dropped 10 degrees. That's unfortunate. We prefer willing recruits, but there are other ways to ensure cooperation. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. You're playing in a world you don't understand, officer. There are rules, hierarchies, bureaucracies that make your human legal system look like a child's game. You've made yourself visible to powers that have existed since before your species climbed down from the trees. And yet, here I am, still standing. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bone. For now. But the collectors aren't the only ones who can claim a soul, Officer Grimm. And unlike them, we don't need ancient contracts. Modern methods are so much more efficient. She handed me a business card. It was blank except for a phone number that seemed to shift and change every time I looked at it. When you change your mind, and you will, call this number. But don't wait too long. Our patience is finite. She walked away, and between one step and the next, she vanished. My cruiser roared to life, all systems normal. The only proof of the encounter was the business card in my hand. When I told Hezekiah about it the next day, his face went pale. "The committee is bad news," he said. "They're like supernatural police, but with no oversight in their own agenda. They claim to maintain order, but really they're about control. Can they actually force me to work for them? Not directly, but they can make your life very difficult. Arrange for you to lose your job, have accidents, find yourself in situations where joining them seems like the only option. So, I'm being stalked by supernatural HR Great. It's worse than that. If the committee is interested in you, it means they have plans for Riverside. Big plans. Those plans became clear 3 nights later. I was patrolling the industrial district when I saw them. Collectors, dozens of them surrounding a warehouse. But they weren't collecting. They were fighting something inside. I called for backup, then approached carefully. Through a broken window, I could see the battle. The collectors were fighting creatures I'd never seen before. Tall, skeletal things with too many joints and faces that hurt to look at. Voidlings, Barnabas said from beside me, appearing in that unsettling way he had. Creatures from between dimensions. They feed on supernatural energy. What are they doing here? Someone summoned them. Someone who wants to destabilize the supernatural ecosystem of Riverside. I thought of Magistrate Thorne and her talk of modern methods. The committee? Possibly. Create a crisis, then step in to solve it. Classic power grab. We have to help the collectors. Barnabas looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Help the beings that wanted to take Cordelia? They're bastards, but they're lawful bastards, these things. I watched as a voidling tore through 3 collectors like tissue paper. These are chaos, and chaos is always worse than order, even bad order. Barnabas sighed. You're going to get us both killed. But you're right. We entered the warehouse. The battle was even worse up close. The voidlings moved in ways that violated physics, holding space around themselves, existing in multiple places at once. The collector's usual shadow powers seemed barely effective. I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out the journal Hezekiah had given me and started reading aloud from a protection spell I'd bookmarked. The words burned my throat as I spoke them, but they had an effect. A barrier of silver light formed around us, and the voidlings recoiled from it. "Impossible," one of the collectors said, turning to stare at me. "You're human. You shouldn't be able to." "Questions later. Fighting now," I interrupted. "How do we stop these things?" "They're anchored to this dimension by a summoning circle. Destroy it, and they'll be pulled back to the void." "Where?" The collector pointed to the far end of the warehouse. Through the chaos, I could see a complex pattern drawn on the floor in what looked like silver paint. "I'll clear a path," Barnabas said, his form shifting into its demonic shape. "You destroy the circle." What followed was the longest 30 seconds of my life. Barnabas carved through the voidlings with claws and teeth, his demon form somehow more solid, more real than theirs. The collectors, seeing our plan, formed a protective formation around us. And I ran, clutching a can of industrial solvent I'd found, praying it would be enough to break the circle. I emptied the entire can on the silver lines, watching them dissolve and blur. The effect was immediate. The voidlings shrieked, a sound that made my ears bleed, and were sucked back into nothingness, leaving only the smell of ozone and wrongness. In the sudden silence, I found myself surrounded by collectors, all staring at me with their red eyes. "You saved us," their leader said, sounding puzzled. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do. Also, better the devil you know." They considered this. "Your logic is sound, if primitive. We are in your debt, Officer Grimm. This is unprecedented. I don't suppose that debt is enough to leave Cordelia and the others alone permanently. No. But it is enough for this." The lead collector pulled out what looked like a small glass vial filled with swirling darkness. "Essence of shadow. If you ever face the committee directly, break this. It will summon us to fulfill our debt. You'd fight the committee for me? Once. One battle, win or lose. Then we are even." They vanished, leaving Barnabas and me alone in the destroyed warehouse. "You know, the committee will know we interfered," Barnabas said, shifting back to human form. "Probably. But what are they going to do? They need me alive if they want to recruit me. There are worse things than death, officer. I'm beginning to learn that." The retaliation came 2 nights later. I arrived for my shift to find Chief Davidson waiting for me in his office. With him was a woman I didn't recognize, severe-looking, with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes. "Officer Grimm," the chief said, and I could tell from his expression that something was very wrong. "This is Agent Patricia Morse from Internal Affairs. There have been some serious allegations made against you." "What kind of allegations?" Agent Morse opened a file. "Mental instability, filing false reports, possible drug use. Multiple witnesses have come forward expressing concern about your behavior." "This is ridiculous." "What witnesses?" She pulled out statements, all from people I didn't recognize, claiming to have seen me, talking to myself, acting erratically, showing signs of paranoid delusion. "There's also the matter of several missing persons cases you were involved with that have irregularities in the reports," she continued. "Inconsistencies that suggest you may have been fabricating evidence." I realized what was happening. The committee was destroying my credibility, setting me up to be fired or worse. "I want my union rep," I said. "Of course. But effective immediately, you're suspended pending investigation. Badge and gun, please." I had no choice. I handed them over, feeling naked without them. As I left the station, Agent Morse followed me out. "This can all go away, Officer Grimm," she said quietly. "One phone call to the right number, and you're reinstated with a commendation instead of a suspension." I looked at her closely. Her eyes had that same reflective quality as Magistrate Thorne's. "You're with them." "The committee. We prefer to think of ourselves as facilitators. We facilitate order, stability, prosperity. All you have to do is join us." "Go to hell." She smiled. "Hell is just another department, officer, and they're not hiring." I went home to find my apartment had been searched. Nothing obvious, but small things were out of place. They wanted me to know they'd been there. I called Cordelia immediately. "It's getting worse," I told her. "The committee is coming after me hard." "Come to my place," she said. "Hezekiah's here." "We're working on something." When I arrived at Cordelia's apartment, I found not just her and Hezekiah, but all 6 of the other descendants, Barnabas and Margaret Thorne, the supernatural lawyer. "We've been discussing the situation," Margaret said. "The committee is a problem for all of us. They don't like loose ends, and we're all loose ends now. So, what do? We form our own organization," Hezekiah said. "A supernatural neighborhood watch, if you will. Pool our resources, protect each other." "That's not enough to stop the committee," I pointed out. "No," Margaret agreed, "but it might be enough to make us not worth the trouble. The committee values efficiency. If we're too expensive to eliminate or control, they might leave us alone. Might isn't very reassuring." "It's better than nothing," Cordelia said. "And we have something they don't expect, unity. Humans and supernatural beings working together. That's rare." "There's something else," Barnabas said. "The ritual to remove my curse. If it works, I'll be fully human, but retain knowledge of the supernatural world. That makes me valuable to multiple factions. We could leverage that." "You want to auction yourself off?" Cordelia asked, horrified. "Not auction. Negotiate. The committee wants Officer Grimm. The Order wants to expand its influence. The collectors want their old ways preserved. We play them against each other. That's dangerous," Hezekiah warned. "If they realize what we're doing—" "They'll realize anyway," Margaret interrupted. "The key is to make it official. Legal. Binding." She pulled out a laptop and started typing. "I'm drafting a supernatural neutrality agreement. Riverside becomes a neutral zone for 1 year. No faction can act against any resident without consent of the others. It's not perfect, but it gives us breathing room." "Why would they agree to that?" "Because," she said with a shark-like smile, "I'll include a clause that after 1 year, if the neutrality has been maintained, each faction gets to make 1 recruitment offer to any resident. Open bidding for our allegiance." "You're turning us into free agents," I said, understanding. "Exactly. And nothing motivates supernatural entities like competition." Over the next week, Margaret worked her legal magic. She reached out to representatives from the committee, the Order, the Collectors, and 3 other factions I'd never heard of. The negotiations were tense, with multiple meetings in neutral locations, usually abandoned churches or crossroads at midnight. I attended one of these meetings wearing a borrowed suit and feeling completely out of place. The representatives sat around a table that had probably hosted 1,000 supernatural negotiations. Magistrate Thorne was there for the committee, looking annoyed. The lead collector floated in place, hood concealing whatever face it might have. Hezekiah represented the Order. The others were even stranger. A woman who seemed to be made of living wood, a man whose shadow moved independently of his body, and something that looked human until you noticed it had too many fingers. "This is unprecedented," Magistrate Thorne said. "Humans don't get to dictate terms to the supernatural world." "They do when they've proven themselves capable of affecting our operations," the collector said. "Officer Grimm saved us from the voidlings. That carries weight. One heroic act doesn't. He also found a loophole in a 300-year-old contract," the Shadow Man interrupted. "That shows innovation, adaptability. The boy who loves the cursed girl is willing to become fully human," the tree woman added. "That kind of sacrifice is interesting." 1 year, Margaret said firmly. 1 year of neutrality in Riverside. After that, open recruitment. Think of it as a trial period. See who performs best under observation. They debated for hours. Threats were made, counteroffers proposed, ancient precedent cited. But eventually they agreed. The supernatural neutrality agreement of Riverside was signed in blood, ink, and substances I didn't want to identify. As we left the meeting, Magistrate Thorne pulled me aside. "You think you've won something here," she said, "but all you've done is delay the inevitable. In 1 year, you'll have to choose a side, and if you choose wrong—" "I'll deal with that in a year," I said. "No, Officer Grimm. You'll start dealing with it tomorrow. Neutrality doesn't mean safety. It just means we can't act directly. But there are so many indirect ways to influence a decision." She vanished, leaving me with a growing sense that we'd won a battle but started a war. The next month was the strangest of my life. With the neutrality agreement in place, Riverside became a supernatural DMZ. Creatures I'd never imagined existed began appearing openly. The local coffee shop started serving special menu items that glowed or moved on their own. A troll opened a mechanic shop, advertising expertise with cursed vehicles. Even the library added a restricted section for grimoires and spellbooks. My suspension from the police force remained in effect, but I found myself busier than ever. I became an unofficial mediator for supernatural disputes. When a vampire complained that his werewolf neighbor was too loud during full moons, they came to me. When a family of brownies claimed a human had stolen their ancestral home, a garden shed, I investigated. "You're like a supernatural community liaison," Cordelia said one evening. We were having dinner at her apartment. She cooked. I brought files on the latest incidents. "Maybe this is what you're meant to do." "I'm meant to be a cop," I insisted. "This is just temporary." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. The normal world seemed increasingly distant, less real than the hidden one I now navigated daily. The night of Barnabas's exorcism finally arrived. We gathered at the abandoned church where we'd fought the collectors. Hezekiah had spent weeks preparing, drawing protective circles, blessing candles, gathering artifacts from around the world. "This is going to hurt," he warned Barnabas. "The demon part of you has been integrated for generations. Removing it is like aggressive surgery without anesthesia." "I understand," Barnabas said. He looked at Cordelia. "If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," she interrupted. "I won't let it." The ritual began at midnight. Barnabas stood in the center of 3 concentric circles, each drawn with different materials: salt, silver dust, and something Hezekiah called angel's tears, but looked suspiciously like mercury. Hezekiah began chanting in Latin, then Greek, then languages that predated both. The air grew thick, oppressive. The candles flickered despite the absence of wind. For the first hour, nothing seemed to happen. Then Barnabas screamed. His body contorted, bones breaking and reforming. His demon side was fighting to stay, manifesting fully for the first time. Wings burst from his back, leathery and bat-like. His fingers became talons, his teeth fangs, but his eyes remained human, filled with agony and determination. "Hold the circles," Hezekiah shouted, as the innermost ring began to crack under the pressure of Barnabas's transformation. We all grabbed containers of salt and silver, reinforcing the barriers as fast as they deteriorated. The church shook, plaster falling from the ceiling. Something was coming. "The demon isn't just leaving," Margaret said, her usual composure cracking. "It's calling for help." The windows exploded inward. Through them came creatures of shadow and flame, lesser demons drawn by the distress call of one of their own. They couldn't cross the circles, but they could make our job harder, screaming in frequencies that made our ears bleed, projecting images of our worst fears into our minds. I saw my wife dying again, saw myself failing to save her, saw Cordelia taken by the collectors, Barnabas becoming fully demon and killing us all. Every failure, every fear played out in vivid detail. "Don't look at them," Hezekiah commanded. "Focus on the ritual." But it was Cordelia who saved us. She pulled out the journal I'd read from months ago and began reading a different passage. Not a spell, but a story. A love story, written by one of her ancestors about falling in love despite a family curse. Her voice cut through the chaos, clear and strong. The demons faltered, confused by the lack of fear, the presence of love in what should have been a place of terror. Barnabas heard her too. His human side grew stronger, fighting back against the demon. The transformation reversed slowly, painfully. Scales became skin, claws became fingers, wings crumbled to ash. With a final shriek that shattered the remaining windows, the demon essence tore free from Barnabas's body. It hung in the air for a moment, a writhing mass of darkness and rage, then dissipated like smoke. Barnabas collapsed. He was human, completely, utterly human, and he was dying. "His body doesn't know how to function without the demon," Hezekiah said, rushing to him. "It's been part of his physiology for so long." "Fix it," Cordelia screamed, cradling Barnabas's head in her lap. "I can't. This is beyond my knowledge." That's when I remembered the vial the collectors had given me. Essence of shadow, not meant for this, but maybe... I broke it over Barnabas's chest. The darkness didn't enter him. Instead, it formed a cocoon around him, like supernatural life support. His breathing steadied, his heart rate normalized. "What did you do?" Hezekiah asked in awe. "I have no idea, but it's working." The cocoon lasted 3 days. During that time, we took shifts watching over Barnabas. The committee sent representatives, offering to help in exchange for my service. The order provided medical texts on demon-human physiology. Even the collectors appeared, curious about this unprecedented use of their essence. On the 3rd night, the cocoon cracked like an egg. Barnabas emerged, weak but alive, and definitely completely human. "How do you feel?" Cordelia asked, helping him sit up. "Empty," he said, "but good empty, like I've been carrying a weight my whole life and just set it down." He looked at his hands in wonder. No claws, no supernatural strength, just human hands. "I'm free," he whispered. Then louder, laughing, "I'm free!" The celebration was short-lived. My phone rang. The chief. "Grim, I need you at the station, now. I'm suspended, not anymore. Internal Affairs found no evidence of wrongdoing. You're reinstated, effective immediately, and we have a situation." I arrived at the station to find chaos. Every holding cell was full of people exhibiting supernatural symptoms. Glowing eyes, minor shape-shifting, speaking in tongues. But according to their families, they were all completely normal humans yesterday. "It started 6 hours ago," Chief Davidson explained. "Random people throughout Riverside suddenly manifesting supernatural abilities. No pattern we can find. Different ages, backgrounds, neighborhoods. I examined the affected people. They were terrified, confused, dangerous to themselves and others. One man kept setting things on fire with his touch. A teenage girl was phasing in and out of visibility. An elderly woman was speaking prophecies that came true within minutes. "This isn't natural," I said. "Someone's doing this. But who? And why?" I thought about the timing, right after Barnabas's successful exorcism, after we'd proven supernatural and human natures could be separated or combined. It's a test, I realized. Someone's testing to see if normal humans can be given supernatural abilities. Who would do that? I knew exactly who. The committee. They couldn't act directly against us during the neutrality period, but they could experiment on others. Create a crisis that would force us to ask for their help. I called Margaret Thorne. We need an emergency meeting of all the faction representatives. Someone's violating the spirit of the neutrality agreement. The meeting convened at 3 a.m. in the abandoned church. All the factions sent representatives, and none of them looked happy about being summoned by humans. The committee is experimenting on innocent humans, I accused directly, giving them supernatural abilities without consent or preparation. Magistrate Thorne smiled coldly. Prove it. The timing is coincidental. Unless you have direct evidence, you're merely speculating. Then let's ask the victims, Margaret said. She'd brought one of the affected, the teenage girl who kept phasing. Tell them what you told me. The girl, trembling and translucent, spoke. I was walking home from school when a woman in a suit approached me. She said I'd been selected for a gift. She touched my forehead, and then this started happening. Description? I asked. Tall, pale, sharp teeth. Her eyes reflected light like a cat's. Everyone turned to look at Magistrate Thorne. That could be anyone, she said, but her smile had faltered. Then you won't mind if we check your agency's logs, the lead collector said. All supernatural activities must be logged. It's the law. The committee's records are classified. Not from us, the tree woman said. We have oversight authority. Trapped, Magistrate Thorne's pleasant facade finally cracked. Fine. Yes, we've been conducting experiments. But not on these people. We're trying to create a vaccine. A vaccine? I asked. Against supernatural influence. A way to make humans immune to possession, transformation, collection. We're trying to protect humanity. By experimenting on them without consent. The first trials were voluntary. These people agreed, but the process had unexpected side effects. Instead of immunity, it granted abilities. Where are the consent forms? Margaret demanded. Magistrate Thorne produced documents. They were real, legally binding, but there was something wrong with them. The signatures were too perfect, too similar. These are forged, Margaret declared, or signed under supernatural compulsion, which is the same thing legally. The other factions began murmuring angrily. Experimenting on humans without proper consent was one of the few universal taboos. The committee has violated the accords, the lead collector intoned. Judgment must be rendered. Wait, I said. Everyone looked at me. What if we make a deal? Officer Grimm, Hezekiah warned, this isn't. The committee helps reverse what they've done to these people. In exchange, they get to continue their research with actual volunteers, proper oversight, and full disclosure of risks. Why would we agree to that? Magistrate Thorne asked. Because the alternative is the other factions unite against you. And because if you succeed in creating supernatural immunity, that's something everyone would want. Imagine humans who can't be possessed, collected, or transformed against their will. It changes everything. The room fell silent, as everyone considered the implications. I volunteer, Cordelia said suddenly, for the research. I've already survived collection attempts and supernatural contracts. Maybe my blood could help. As do I, said one of the other descendants. Then another. Soon, all 6 were volunteering. We'll need oversight, the tree woman said. Representatives from each faction. And compensation for the victims, Margaret added. Medical care, therapy, and a settlement for the violation of their rights. It took hours of negotiation, but eventually an agreement was reached. The committee would reverse the unwanted transformations and pay restitution. Research would continue under strict oversight, and Riverside would become the official testing ground for supernatural human integration. As the sun rose and the factions dispersed, Magistrate Thorne approached me. "You're clever, Officer Grimm. You turned our violation into an opportunity for cooperation. Just doing my job. Your job seems to have expanded considerably. Perhaps you should consider a career change." "Actually," I said, "I've been thinking about that." 6 months later, I stood in the newly established Office of Supernatural Affairs, located in what used to be an abandoned shopping mall. My badge still said police officer, but my jurisdiction now extended to things most cops never dreamed of. Cordelia worked there too, as liaison between human and supernatural communities. Barnabas, fully human but retaining his supernatural knowledge, served as consultant. Margaret ran the legal department. Hezekiah trained new recruits in protective protocols. The committee's research had yielded unexpected results. They couldn't create immunity to supernatural influence, but they could create a symbiosis. Humans who volunteered could form beneficial partnerships with supernatural entities. Not possession, but cooperation. The first successful case was a young boy with terminal cancer. A lesser healing spirit bonded with him, curing his disease while gaining a physical anchor in our world. Both benefited. Both chose it freely. "It's not perfect," Magistrate Thorne admitted during one of our oversight meetings. "There are still those who oppose any human supernatural integration." She was right. Extremist factions on both sides caused problems. Human supremacist groups tried to destroy our offices twice. Radical supernatural entities attempted to kidnap our volunteers, but we stopped them together. 1 year after the neutrality agreement, the factions gathered for the promised recruitment offers. They each made their pitches to the residents of Riverside. The committee offered power and position. The order offered knowledge and protection. The collectors offered immortality of a sort. But most of us, including me, chose none of them. We chose to remain independent, to continue building bridges between worlds. "You realize this makes you all targets," the lead collector warned. "Without faction protection." "We protect each other," I said, "human and supernatural, working together." "That's our faction. It wasn't easy. We faced challenges daily, supernatural crimes that human law didn't cover. Human fears of the supernatural that led to violence, the constant balance between secrecy and transparency. But we managed. Case by case, incident by incident, we built something new. A model for coexistence that other cities began to adopt. 3 years later, I married Cordelia in that abandoned church where so much had happened. Barnabas was my best man, fully human and happily so. Hezekiah officiated, using vows that bound us in both human and supernatural law. The wedding was attended by humans, demons, spirits, and things that defied classification. During the reception, held at the supernatural-friendly coffee shop, Magistrate Thorne approached me. "You've built something remarkable here, Officer Grimm." We all did. "The committee has been watching. We're impressed. So impressed that we're restructuring, adopting your model on a global scale. You're giving up control?" She laughed. "Never. But we're sharing it. Equal representation between human and supernatural. It's the future, whether we like it or not." As I danced with my new wife, surrounded by beings that shouldn't exist in the same space peacefully, I thought about how it all started. A stalking complaint that wasn't really stalking. A protector mistaken for a predator. Ancient debts and modern solutions. "What are you thinking about?" Cordelia asked. "How wrong we were about everything." "Barnabas wasn't stalking you. He was saving you. And in the end, we all saved each other. Think it will last? She looked around the room, at vampires chatting with accountants, werewolves dancing with librarians, the collectors playing poker with off-duty cops. Nothing lasts forever, but this is a good start. She was right. It wasn't perfect. We still had crimes, conflicts, crises, but we faced them together, human and supernatural, each bringing our strengths to the table. My name is Officer Thaddeus Grimm. I work the graveyard shift in Riverside, Indiana. My beat includes humans, demons, spirits, and things that don't have names yet. It's dangerous, complicated, and absolutely insane. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Because sometimes the monster under your bed is just trying to pay rent. Sometimes the stalker is a guardian angel with poor social skills. And sometimes the thin blue line isn't between order and chaos. It's between two worlds learning to coexist. The supernatural is real. It's here. It's not going anywhere. And neither am I. Every night I put on my badge and gun, grab my protective amulets and blessed ammunition, and head out into a world most people don't know exists. I respond to calls about possessed appliances, mediate disputes between century-old blood feuds, and occasionally save the world from interdimensional invasions. Just another night on the graveyard shift. The radio crackles. Officer Grimm, we have a report of a dragon in someone's backyard. Complainant says it's eating their garden gnomes. I sigh, start the cruiser, and head out. Because in Riverside, Indiana, even the impossible is just another call on the log. And somewhere in the night, Cordelia is waiting for me to come home safe. Barnabas is probably playing chess with Hezekiah. Margaret is drafting new supernatural legislation. The committee is planning their next move. The collectors are honoring their ancient contracts. And the world keeps spinning, balanced precariously between normal and paranormal. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I've got a dragon to deal with. Unit 19 responding, I say into the radio. ETA 5 minutes. Tell the complainant to keep their distance and for God's sake, don't feed it. Just another night in the new normal. Just another story that no one would believe. Just another reason why I love this job, this city, this impossible life we've built between the shadows and the light. The dragon can wait another minute. I pull over, looking at the city lights, at the hidden world that pulses beneath the visible one. 3 years ago, I was just a cop working nights. Now, I'm a guardian of the threshold, a protector of both worlds. And as I drive toward my next call, I can't help but smile. Because every nightmare ends,